Second reading debate is adjourned and the bill is referred to the House Committee.
Members' motion with no legislative effect. Mr. Edmund Wong will move a motion on comprehensively reviewing the SAR government's use of resources to optimize its fiscal structure. Mr. Tang Ka-piu will move an amendment to the motion. This council will proceed to a joint debate on the motion and the amendment. Later, I will first call upon Mr. Edmund Wong to speak and move the motion. Then I will call upon Mr. Tang Ka-piu to speak, but he may not move the amendment at this stage. The joint debate now begins. Members who wish to speak, please press the Request to Speak button. I now call upon Mr. Edmund Wong to speak and move the motion. Mr. Edmund Wong. Thank you, President. I move that the motion as printed on the agenda be passed. Soon, the Financial Secretary will announce his budget. Before the budget is announced, there is often heated discussion on what measures there will be. This year is no exception, but the focus has shifted from what concessions will be provided rather than now it's expenditure, how much expenditure should we cut. And we have over $100 billion of fiscal deficit. Many members have submitted suggestions to the Financial Secretary, and we have talked about different ways to increase government revenue or cut expenditure. Today, my focus will be not only about cutting expenditure. I think, on the other hand, the government has much room to enhance administrative efficiency in order to better use resources in order to achieve efficiency. Just as in the US, President Trump actually talked about the federal government having to cut many of its staff members. And we have seen many in Hong Kong calling for a cut in the salaries of civil servants. As a part of the business sector, I would say this is more appropriate for private companies because private companies are more flexible. As long as the pros outweigh the cons, they would do it. But then with public organizations and the government in general, I think this is an approach that would be too rash. It may in turn ripple into the private sector. And before we have fiscal reserves of 28 months of government expenditure, now we will have less than 10 months of expenditure in our fiscal reserves. It is now time for the government to review how we can enhance administrative efficiency. If we can better make use of public resources, not to waste any of such resources, we will already achieve efficiency. For example, with the meters, parking meters. As an accountant, figures are everything. According to the latest figures, as at 2023, we have approximately 19,000 meter parking spaces. In 2023, the income is approximately $400 million. It seems to be quite a lot, but when you think about it, for the 19,000 meter parking spaces, every day, we are earning $1 million odd. So every day, basically, it would be $58 per parking meter. Many of the members are drivers, so you should know. It is very hard to find a meter parking space. I'm not talking about during the peak hours in very populated areas. I'm talking about less densely populated areas. Mondays to Saturdays, 8 in the morning to midnight, you would only need $128 for a metered parking space. And now you only pay $50 odd, as I said earlier, per day. Obviously, there is something wrong here. Why this happens, it may be due to some drivers not paying. It may also due to some shops occupying the metered parking spaces. If the police come, they will pay And we have some streets with many restaurants, they will charge drivers for expensive fees. While they do charge such fees, they don't actually pay the meter parking charges. I believe the government knows of such situation. If we rely only on our existing technologies, we can already resolve this issue, such as in Shenzhen, many meter parking spaces have particular systems installed, and people must pay the charges. Why are we not making use of existing technologies to ensure our public resources are used effectively? We haven't really reviewed meter parking charges either. In Causeway Bay or in other places, we actually charge $8 per hour for some popular areas like this. Is this a good use of public resources? I know we can just see different ways of checking how we can use public resources. As Mr. Vincent Ching said, for leisure facilities, we have had many reforms, but we still have citizens having to pay intermediaries to rent the facilities. That is, they are still touting the venues. We also have people abusing public housing resources, so that people in need to wait for 5 to 7 years to get a public housing unit. We have seen an improvement in the situation in public housing. We have seen the Housing Bureau do much to make sure we are effectively using our resources. As you may remember, Ms. Rosanna Law, she was then the principal government official of the Housing Bureau. She went to the Queen's Hill estate. She said she saw that there was an expensive vehicle parked there with a mainland Chinese license as well as a Hong Kong plate. And she doubted why there was such a vehicle parked there. And then they identified indeed there was a case of abuse. We had to wait until a senior government official to inspect the place to find this problem. We had staff members there every day. Why didn't we find out about this earlier? If we had more frontline officers talking about this before, we may have already had many public housing units recovered. We don't have to wait until today when we are actually promoting basic housing units, and we have to spend much public money on this. And I think this is a deep-rooted issue in the civil service. We have seen in a way that has hurt administrative efficiency. If we have more people like Ms. Rosanna Law who would go to inspect housing estates, and now the Kai Tak Sports Park, we will enhance efficiency. We all know that this is the right thing to do, but we haven't seen this being done. We have civil servants, whether they perform well or not, they will still get a pay increase regardless. In fact, I think that is unfair. My mother was an ex-civil servant. She had worked hard, but we have over 170,000 civil servants. There were indeed some people who do not work that hard, and if they can see that no matter how they perform, they will get a pay rise, they wouldn't be actively trying to do better and try to resolve the problems. Is it time perhaps to review the pay adjustment mechanism? I'm not saying that we need to quantify their performance in terms of how many housing units to recover or how many fixed penalty notices to issue. But then if we are making sure that we are increasing or decreasing pay based on merit, would that enhance civil service performance? That may be the case. For the case of enhancing administrative efficiency and saving administrative expenditure, we should really think about this. I'll stop here. I will listen to different members' views. I now put the question to you, Mr. Edmund Wong's motion be passed. Mr. Tang Ka-piu.
Thank you, Deputy President. Now, the bad fiscal position of the government is a result of the cycle as well as the loss of confidence in the economy. Now, because of this, the government must be spending its resources wisely and precisely. I would like to put forward the FTU's position as well as our suggestions. Concerning the performance of the civil service as a whole, the FTU applauds and commends the performance. The civil service has been crucial in implementing the improvements in the electoral system as well as the administration of the city. Civil servants should not be blamed as the reason for the bad fiscal positions of the government. Now, the FTU never asked for a pay cut in any industries. Of course, that includes the civil service. Besides protection of employees' rights, civil servants and employees in subvented organizations are the staunch pillar of middle class in the city. They are the mainstay of boosting and propping up the economy. A pay cut would lead to a confidence crisis in the city. It would also lead to a wave of pay cuts in the entire territory. It will undermine stability in Hong Kong. On the other hand, we need to reform and consolidate manpower resources in the civil service and spend the manpower resources correctly. Now, in my amendments, I mentioned the strength of third sector. The third sector means social organizations which do not seek profits besides the government and subvented bodies. For example, there are 4 divisions under the Labor Department. One is the Employment Service Division. There are 400 civil servants serving in employment centers across the district. I suggest that we can outsource these employment centers to service bodies which are familiar with the area. The free up manpower can be dedicated to ensuring OSH and employee exploitation. Another example is the LCSD. The LCSD manages a number of facilities, including sports centers and libraries. These can be outsourced to the third sector for management, especially sports associations which are familiar with the sports. Now, we have a lot of 24-hour gym rooms. A sports association may be able to run sports facilities 24 hours around the clock. The library is a place where the public gets to read. Usually the venues are big and spacious and well decorated. If community organizations are brought in to run the libraries, there will be synergy because these organizations can organize more reading activities. So the FTU suggests utilizing the strength of the third sector to lessen the burden of the civil service, and then the free up manpower can be dedicated to enforcement work. We are also proposing lifelong learning in various industries. I believe that the civil service should also play more roles and continue to improve themselves to keep up with the reform needs. Also, we should adopt innovative technologies to enhance efficiency. For example, Working Family Allowance Department and also Student Services Department. Maybe these functions can be consolidated under a single department with the assistance of technologies. This will save up manpower, and these manpower can be redeployed to enforce the law and care for the public. The government can consider establishing administrative centers based on districts. Time's up. Please stop speaking.
庫務局局長。
Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury. Madam Deputy, I thank Mr. Wong for moving this motion and Mr. Tang for the amendments to enable the government to listen to members' views on this very important subject before the budget on the 26th of this month. On managing public finance, the government has all along adhered to Article 107 of the Basic Law and followed the principle of keeping expenditure within the limits of revenue in drawing up the budget, strive to achieve a fiscal balance and avoid deficits, and keep budget commensurate with the growth of the GDP. The government has a constitutional duty to manage its finances prudently so as to achieve fiscal balance over a period of time. During the 3-year epidemic, the government introduced several rounds of large-scale counter-cyclical measures to support enterprises and the public. These measures stabilized the economy and people's livelihood, but led to a decline in the government's fiscal reserves. Given the complexity and volatility of the external environment, Hong Kong, as a small, externally oriented economy, was inevitably affected. It would take time for revenue to fully recover. At the same time, the government will need to devote resources to maintain economic growth and enhance the public services, and will therefore face a deficit in the current financial year. Taking into account the net proceeds from bond issuance, the deficit is estimated to be below $100 billion. The government has the commitment to overcome the challenges of public finance. I agree with the importance of reviewing the use of government resources referred to Mr. Wong's motion. The government is implementing a fiscal consolidation program to restore fiscal balance. On controlling expenditure, the government has strictly controlled the growth of operating expenditure, including implementing a zero growth in the civil service, keeping the establishment no higher than that at the end of March 2021, and requiring departments to optimize public money through enhancing management and digitization. The government is leading by example by implementing the Productivity Enhancement Program to achieve an annual saving of 1% in current expenditure from 24-25 to 26-27 without affecting the CSSA and Social Security allowance. Apart from expenditure, the government also examines the capital works expenditure and adjusts the priority of these projects. Projects at a mature stage of planning, including the Northern Metropolis, will be prioritized and taken forward, while projects at a preliminary stage of planning, they will be adjusted in keeping with their importance. The above measures are in accord with the proposal to enhance administrative efficiency and reduce administrative expenditure in Mr. Wong's motion. Mr. Tang's amendment mentions that we should leverage the strengths of the third sector and innovative technology in service provision. I agree with that. Bureaus and departments have all along been providing public services in ways that suit their operational needs, the nature of their services, and their effectiveness. Nowhere more so than the social welfare services and the labor services have also roped in NGOs. Regardless of the mode of service delivery, bureaus and departments will endeavor to ensure the public resources are put to good use, and they will also enhance efficiency through reprioritization, internal redeployment of resources, re-engineering of work process, and application of innovative technologies. In his motion, Mr. Wong also proposed to increase government revenue. The 4 revenue-raising measures under the fiscal consolidation scheme last year, namely the 2-tier standard rate system for salaries tax, the rise of business registration fees, the progressive rating system for domestic tenements, and the resumption of hotel accommodation tax have all been implemented and will bring a total of $3.1 billion a year. In considering revenue measures, the government will consider the financial situation, economic environment, and social needs, while maintaining our advantage of simple and low tax regime and our competitiveness in enticing business establishments. We've also followed the principles of those who can afford pay more and user pays, and strike a balance between increasing revenue and minimizing the impact on the general public. In addition, the government proposes to levy a global minimum tax of 15% on large multinational conglomerates with annual gross receipts of 750 million euros, and a minimum top-up tax in accordance with the OECD scheme to combat base erosion and profit shifting, or BEPS. The bill is now being scrutinized by the Bills Committee. We expect that this will bring an additional tax revenue of $15 billion per annum from 2027-28 onwards. In order to optimize the government's fiscal structure, the government has also adopted a bond issuance as a financial tool for infrastructure projects. The government announced in 24-25 budget that it planned to issue bonds totaling $95 billion to $135 billion per annum from 24-25 to 28-29. The actual amount to be issued will depend on the prevailing public finance, market conditions, and progress of work. The government will adhere to stringent fiscal discipline and maintain borrowing at a healthy level. In drawing up the 25-26 budget, we will review the scale and mode of bond issuance. I will listen carefully to members' views and recommendations and give a consolidated response later on.
Reverend Peter Kuhn, Deputy President, the budget is going to be announced soon. It is expected that for the third consecutive year, the government is going to record a fiscal deficit. The situation is worrying. According to many analysis, the fiscal deficit has become a structural issue. We are worried that the government may have to survive on borrowing. How can the government create revenue streams and cut expenditure? That is the question. In terms of revenue creation, the government has yet to reassure the public. For example, developments of the INT industry and tapping the Southeast Asian as well as the Middle East markets, it takes time. In terms of transformation and upgrading of traditional industries, we are still falling behind. The government has not addressed the issues of relying on land sale premium as a major source of government's revenue. The government's hands are really tied. In terms of expenditure cutting, the government has not been bold enough. For example, expenditure on healthcare and social welfare. Many have urged that we should adopt the users pay principle and increase the fee charged in NED as well as reviewing the $2 transport scheme. However, the government has fallen short of addressing the issues. If a company is recording a loss, we can imagine the CEO exhausts every means to boost revenue and cut expenditure. Increase of revenue depends on a lot of external factors. On the other hand, cutting expenditure is easier. For private corporations to reduce loss, they would cut item of larger spending with a smaller number of employees affected. Now, for the government, expenditures grades in terms of education and healthcare. They are major spending items. However, they are related to the well-being of the public, so they should be given lower priority. In terms of civil service, with the recruitment efforts of the government, the establishment is now 190,000. The expenditure on salary has exceeded $150 billion. It accounts for 25% of recurrent expenditure, including expenditure on related family members. That is some $13 billion. It has increased by 65% compared with before the epidemic. Travel allowances for civil servants has risen by 50% over the past 5 years. It gives the optic that the government is too generous to the civil service. In terms of cutting expenditure, we must consider the public optic. The government shouldn't hesitate at cutting expenditure in relation to civil service welfare. Principal officials and senior civil servants should take the lead in taking a salary cut and give the optics that the government understands the plight of the public. It will garner support for measures cutting expenditure on livelihood items. Now, by streamlining the ascension ladder in the civil service, we can save some cost. We should stop creating supernumerary positions and also review the post-civil service retirement plan and slim up the establishment. While maintaining zero growth for the establishment, we should freeze civil service pay and also control the growth of salary for senior management. Now, I think we have seen the fruits of governance returning to stable, but the economy is still experiencing headwind. I look forward to more cost-cutting and revenue-creating measures in the coming year. Thank you. Mr. Chen Xu-hong, Deputy President, I speak in support of the motion of comprehensively reviewing the SAR government's use of resources to optimize its fiscal structure from Mr. Edmund Wong and also Mr. Bill Tang's amendment. Now, with geopolitical tension, our market's growth has been stunted. Now, major sources of revenues, including land sale premium and stamp duty on stock transfer, has decreased. Now, it's estimated that the fiscal deficit will be as large as $100 billion. Although we have to take a cut in expenditure, we can't stop building infrastructure. I hope the expenditure will remain at some $90 billion each year for capital works projects. Now, with the aging construction industry and increasing cost, construction cost is higher than before. According to a survey, construction costs rank the first in Asia and ninth in the world for Hong Kong. It increases the financial burden when the government is taking forward infrastructure work. It also affects the effective utilization of public resources. It hinders on our growth. Now I will focus on capital works projects as well as information technology projects. The government should establish a review committee on the cost effectiveness of capital works projects. The scope of the steering committee on streamlining development control should be formulated rapidly. The committee should review the approval procedures for development as well as the definition and standard. This will streamline the internal administrative processes and cut costs and reduce the risk of overbudget. This can ensure that money is spent on items with the highest priority. The government should also expand the scope of projects where third-party auditors can be engaged to approve the items. Now, after the completion of the project, the government should have a mechanism to review the cost efficacy of the project to see whether the objectives of the projects have been met, and also review the cost effectiveness of complicated projects. The government should also study and establish a centralized procurement platform led by the government to cater for the future need of infrastructure projects. By centralized procurement of construction materials and economy of scale, we can lower the cost for contractors. By moving away from the court order model, we can avoid the accumulation of inventories. Now, concerning new I&T proposals, the government has applied for $6.7 billion in terms of government digitalization projects. In 2025, the price tag has increased by $390 million After the completion of the projects, within 6 months, the departments need to submit a report to the Digital Policy Office to show that the objectives have been met and also the reasons for delay. Now, performance summary has been submitted to the panel for member scrutiny. However, in recent times, the department has stopped submitting the performance summary. And also, the government has conducted audits on 73 departments' digitalization progress. The auditing report would review the efficacy of these work. The government said the auditing work has been completed. However, what benefits have been brought to the services offered by the departments? How much manpower and resources have been saved? These have not been made public. Whenever there are new programs to be launched, the government would ask the Finance Committee for funding to create more posts, but never explain to us the purposes and the efficacies of the projects. That is not good. Thank you.
Mr. Chen Chenying, Deputy President, in recent years, with changes in the economic landscape, we have seen increasing government expenditure, but then we haven't had a significant increase in government revenue. That's why we are in a tight position. I thank Mr. Edmund Wong for raising this motion for us to talk about how to optimize its fiscal structure. It is definitely necessary in this time. In 2023-24, we have education, healthcare, and social welfare expenditure accounting for close to 60% of recurrent expenditure. We have seen significant increases in these three areas as well. Many have reservations. Recently, someone said some one-off education expenditures were unnecessary. And we have also had compensation for traffic accident injuries that have been abused. We also had people who are living overseas coming to Hong Kong enjoying the healthcare benefits of Hong Kong. While we do want to attach great importance to making sure we provide adequate education, social welfare, and healthcare, there is a need to enhance resource allocation to enhance cost effectiveness. And according to the Audit Commission's report, some of the public works projects will go over project and would experience significant delay. So we do put in the input, but we do not value monitoring in implementation. So we need to make sure we are practicing cost effectiveness throughout the life cycle of public works projects, as well as set some indicators. There is also room to improve in departments' implementation. They do not really implement their plans and budgets. We need to make sure we are evaluating the performance of different departments to ensure they are making good use of resources, and the resources are used to meet actual needs of the departments to prevent abuse. That would also help consolidate resources in different departments, such as in IT systems. For civil service pay, it accounts for 20% of the expenditure. But right now we are talking about the annual pay adjustment. In fact, with the establishment, it has not changed much, as we are outsourcing much of the government's work. With AI, we can replace many job roles. I believe some of the roles of civil servants can be replaced with advanced technologies. If we are to enhance efficiency, and we can cut civil service establishment by 5 to 10%, that would have already saved us $10 billion. And increments in points will be even more than the annual pay raise. If we can make sure pay adjustment or pay increment will only apply to those who who have good performance, that would be better. We also have recently land sale revenue decreasing in the past 2 years. It has therefore exacerbated the fiscal deficit. It has highlighted the problem that we do not have diversified sources for revenue. We should increase our tax base so that we will have more stability in government revenue. In the ballooning government expenditure in 2000, we have set up a committee to review fiscal expenditure. We should have such committee again. We should refer to the experience of Singapore. We would have departments for every 5 years review whether any of all of their projects are worth continuing. We now have many new engines for growth, and we are now at the stage of transformation. This is a critical stage. We need to break some traditions. We need to enhance transparency and efficiency in order to effectively use our resources. I so speak in support of the motion and the amendment. Mr. Sunny Tan, we will have less than $100 billion in fiscal deficit. We have such a large fiscal deficit because we have less in land sale revenue as well as stamp duty revenue. I agree with what is said in the motion. We need to review the government's use of resources to optimize its fiscal structure. We need to have more sources of government revenue. And I have some suggestions. We need to make sure we're effectively using the government's resources. We should start with the top-level design. With high-level steering, we will reset our priorities and we will have them lead the change in the government structure and review workflow of various departments in manpower as well as administrative procedures to make sure there is no overlapping or duplication. We can also make use of digitalization to enhance efficiency. Before on the reprioritization of government procedures is led by the efficiency office, and then it is combined with another department to become the digital policy office, and I have asked whether we will be able to continue to enhance government efficiency effectively. We have many departments who have room to make their workflow more efficient. With high-level steering, we can coordinate such work. I also urge the government to enhance digitalization and go smart in order to enhance efficiency and develop new sources of revenue. We can perhaps make use of technologies to lower the costs of operations for companies. And I think we can make sure we are using IM Smart effectively so that we can facilitate businesses and members of the public in this area. We should also offer more flexibility to departments by making good use of the forces of public bodies. We can have departments work with public bodies and maybe even the business sector to enhance implementation of government projects. We need to optimize fiscal structure. Also, we need to, into long term, think about how we can have new sources of government revenue. We have all along have a simple and low tax system. We shouldn't change that simply because of cyclical fluctuations. The right way to go is to invest in the future. Next, we also need to make sure we are attracting companies to come to Hong Kong and attracting investment that will help enhance stamp duty revenue. Apart from trying to reach out to top-notch enterprises, we should also have more SMEs come to Hong Kong. We now have 360,000 SMEs, but in the mainland we have 52 million SMEs and micro-sized enterprises. If we can have only a small amount of them come to Hong Kong, it would already bring great benefits to the economy of Hong Kong. We should continue to leverage on our role as a super connector so that we will have more SMEs in the mainland come to Hong Kong, and we can work together to help them go global. And we will also have more companies rent our commercial premises in Hong Kong. When faced with uncertainties, Hong Kong should be innovative and make sure to implement reforms to make sure we are effectively using our resources and using them efficiently so that we can make sure we are still thriving in this uncertainty. Mr. Kenneth Lau. Deputy President, in the year of a snake, many citizens are now concerned about how the government is going to do with such a high fiscal deficit. Everyone is calling for a timetable for us to reverse the deficit so that we can prosper again. The Financial Secretary said explicitly that we would focus now on cutting government expenditure rather than developing new sources of revenue. And before we are cutting 1% of government expenditure and we are to reset our priorities, that is a good way to go. But with advancement in technology, we can make use of digitalization to save costs. Perhaps we can no longer have officials carrying hard copy name cards. We can make use of WeChat instead. That should save some printing costs, and that will also be more environmentally friendly. Many people have called for a pay cut for civil servants. I think this is not an effective way to go. We are now trying to boost the economy and we are trying to strive for more development. If we cut pay of the civil service, it will hurt their morale. It's not good for the economy. And the private sector will often follow suit. If there is a pay cut in the private sector, that will hurt consumption in general. It will also look bad for overseas talents who were originally interested in coming to Hong Kong. The Hon Cook does not agree with any ways to freeze or lower the salaries of civil servants, but we think there is room to review the civil service workflow in order to enhance efficiency. We need to make sure we have new sources of government revenue apart from saving government expenditure. The Hon Cook's proposal said that we should implement reforms and we should make good use of our assets. We can introduce a bets and sweeps tax. In 2023-24, we have $106.3 billion in bets and sweeps in Hong Kong. We had over 560,000 betting, but many of them are betting illegally, and that is a lost source of revenue. The Hon Cook therefore suggests that we can have golf or tennis, various ball games. We can also have betting for them. We should also have a specific incorporated company that will have the company operated by the government, and then we will have a tendering for whom to operate this entity. We should also make good use of our advantages. And in fact, the director said that we need to make sure we are leveraging on the capital market to boost the economy. I asked the government to follow what the director said and issue a white paper to boost investor confidence. We should also hold a summit so that we will have more business leaders from mainland and different parts of the world so that we can boost the economy. The stock and property markets are the indicators of economic performance of Hong Kong, and we have already had a 30% drop in the property market. We need to send a strong message that we are stabilizing the property market, including having developers pay land premiums in installments, so that would alleviate the pressure on them. Deputy President, we need to make sure the budget can meet the needs of the economy so that we can achieve fiscal balance and have a prosperous market. I so submit speaking in support of the motion and the amendment.
Dr. Tik Chi-yun. Madam Deputy, in the recent paper submitted to LegCo, the Directorate Staff Establishment, the establishment was 1,618, and we've seen an increase of 201 posts. In recent times, there have been an increase of 19 directorate posts. Given the $100 billion worth of deficit, the government has not really controlled the expansion of the civil service. There are suggestions that if the government pay or civil service pay were to be docked, it would affect the market. But that has really neglected the crux of the matter. There should be a reform of the civil service in the first place. Madam Deputy, when the government creates posts, they keep advancing the argument that there is an increase in workload. There has never been any attempt to streamline the process or re-engineer the processes to rise to the challenges. In the digital age, the government is devoting a lot of resources to this area. It should have enhanced the efficiency, but the establishment is still ballooning. It shows that the government is not moving on with times. Even if there are vacancies, the government can still maintain the service. It is an indication that there is room for restructuring. The government should reform the civil service instead of allowing it to balloon further. As to pay cut for the civil service, some suggest that this would have a negative effect. But by international experience, this would in turn enhance the efficiency. In Argentina, the massive reform has enabled them to avert the crisis. In the UK, they're also cutting a lot of civil service posts. The same can be said about New Zealand. All these examples go to show that reforming the civil service will not undermine the economy. If anything, it would bring about good benefits. There are many government departments that are still mired in traditional mode of operation. People would have to run around different departments to complete the application process. By re-engineering the process, we can save manpower and enhance the efficiency. In Singapore, they have undergone digital transformation and build up a smart civil service. And this is something that we should reference from. This is an opportunity for us to reform the civil service. I think there should be a freeze of 2 years recruitment. There are 10% vacancies at the moment. By freezing the recruitment, we can save as much as $16 billion. Top civil servants should have a pay cut of 5.5%. This is percentage of pay rise in previous year. It's still a massive cut, but it goes to show that they do have commitment to Hong Kong. For the lower rung, middle and lower rung civil servants, they should be spared. Third, there should be a 5% target of streamlining. Each bureau and department should set up a working group to come up with a 5% cut proposal. This will help the government to reduce the fiscal deficit. It would also modernize the civil service, and a more efficient civil service would be created. Madam Deputy, the deficit is a structural deficit. We need to have structural reform, and the civil service reform is something that the public would expect the government to do, and this is a measure that has to be undertaken. The government should show the determination, raise efficiency through technology. By going down the path of reform, we will be able to meet the needs of the modern-day society. Thank you. I support the motion. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Madam Deputy, I support the original motion moved by Mr. Edmund Wong and the amendment moved by Bill Tang. The world is fraught with uncertainties. Hong Kong is undergoing restructuring, and things are leaving a lot to be desired. For 3 financial years in a row, we have registered a fiscal deficit. The reserves have been diminishing. Given these challenges, the BPA and myself agree with the motion that the government should take resolute action to tap new sources of revenue and cut spending. We should optimize the fiscal structure. Not only should we address the short-term fiscal deficit, we should inject new impetus to new development going forward to ensure that we're going to have a robust finance for the public. First, the government should reform to enhance efficiency and cut public expenditure. There are suggestions that the government civil servants should have their pay docked. That this is not a pragmatic move. Not only will this undermine morale, the private sector would follow suit, and this would undermine the confidence in economic recovery. Instead, the government should review the functions and establishment of the government departments and enhance the allocation of resources. And the government should also loosen up the red tape, cut the red tape. The Development Bureau is enhancing the efficiency. This will be conducive to project implementation. We are lagging behind in terms of e-service. The government should roll out more digital service and use AI and big data like digital filing system should be implemented to minimize manpower. The government has to make sure that every single dollar would be put to good use. We should upgrade the industries and improve public services. The government should also tap alternative sources of revenue, like there are suggestions of GST and also additional tax on the well-off. I do think we should be rash in taking these measures because this will undermine our competitiveness of low and predictable tax regime. The government should be innovative in the mindset and come up with innovative measures. For certain industries, the government can come up with preferential tax concession packages to lure enterprises and to stimulate the development there. We can promote mega event economy to make the pie bigger, because that would improve the situation. As the saying goes, rising tides will lift all the boats. In terms of transport, education, and healthcare, the government should get rid of the myth of public-private collusion. We should bring in instead PPP to improve the efficiency. This is going to be a win-win situation. The government should take a leaf out of the book of other jurisdictions and set up a fund. If times are good, certain funding should be put into the fund so that during economic downturn we can have counter-cyclical investment. This would reduce the volatility of the public finances and the implications on society. Thank you. Mr. Lam Chen Sing. Madam Deputy, I thank Mr. Edmund Wong for moving this motion. The government is facing the challenges of fiscal deficit. I think it is too early to talk about a structural deficit. Maybe this is only cyclical in nature. During COVID, a lot of resources have been devoted to combat the epidemic. I think we need a little more time to observe the situation before jumping to any conclusion. But Hong Kong's industrial setup is rather simplistic. In terms of taxation, we rely so much on real estate and land sale and the stamp duty, and this is falling far short of expectation. So we have to diversify the industries, and this is really the way to go to improve the fiscal structure. Hong Kong used to be focusing on the 4 traditional industries: finance, trade, logistics, and so on. Over the years, they take up, well, over 50% of the GDP, and there is a lack of room for diversified development. The government is developing new industrialization in recent years and massively develop the I&T industry and inject new economic impetus. I think the government should introduce new industries. New industrialization should, in the long run, be increased and boost the government's revenue. In terms of the use of resources, the government should review the 1823 chat box and the use of drones to do the aerial survey work. I think the government should proceed in a more systematic and organized manner. The commercialization expenditure has increased by $300 billion, and different departments are developing their own computer system. Like the Labor Department has introduced the system for the maternity leave pay, and there is also a system for the MPF. I think that they should be consolidated. There are certain apps that are really obsolete. These mobile apps are hardly ever used. Isn't it right for us to achieve some savings there as well? There are some fees that have not been reviewed for an awful long time, and without affecting the disadvantage, they should be reviewed. Like the airport departure tax, if you increase from 120 to 180, with the revision, it will be increased by $800 billion from the $160 billion. And I don't think it would create a heavy burden. Now, we have so many different talent schemes. The visa fees are pitched at $200. If the Immigration Department would like to achieve a cost recovery and raise this to $500, it will bring in some revenue without affecting the incentive to come to Hong Kong. For children of these talents, if they are educated in public schools, shouldn't they be charged a particular fee? The local students' definition should be reviewed. The talents children should be charged slightly higher fees. We're not charging at cost. It's only that we are subsidizing them less so that Hong Kong people will enjoy more resources. This is the case in many parts of the world, in many jurisdictions. I'm sure that the fees can well be afforded by these families. It will not undermine the incentives for them to come to Hong Kong. With these words, I support the motion.
Mr. Adrian Ho. Thank you, Deputy President. In recent years, the fiscal positions of the government has been concerning. In terms of revenue, land premium revenue was some $5.2 billion, a reduction of 73% compared with the past year, a low in 11 years. In revenue, in year 2024 to 25, the total expenditure is estimated to be some $700 billion, accounting for 26% in the GDP. Compared with 14% in 1996 to 97, there is a major increase. So we need to study how we can create more revenue streams and cut expenditure. Now, despite the challenging fiscal position, the economic activities and economic developments of Hong Kong cannot stop. In his motion, Mr. Edmund Wong mentioned that we need to enhance administrative efficiency and save administrative expenditure. I think that is very important. By streamlining administrative procedures, not only can we offer more convenience to the public, it will also improve cost management in public services and ensure that resources are spent wisely and reduce wastage. For example, by enhancing electronic government services, administrative efficiency will be increased while operating costs reduced. Applications and inquiries can be handled more effectively. Now, according to the 14th Five-Year Plan, continuous improvements in digitalized government services is one of the country's goals. Now, the government should continue to provide electronic services and optimize deployment of resources. Departments should study the establishment of an electronic platform. Internally, it can enhance the retrieval and sharing of information between departments and enhance collaboration. Now, for livelihood items, for example, application for subsidies, licenses, and government services, we can make use of the opportunity to make it fully electronic to save waiting time and manpower. This will also help establish a transparent system for public services benefiting members of the public. Now, in terms of infrastructure, from 2024 to 25 to 28 to 29, the government's expenditure on public infrastructure or capital works is some $90 billion, an increase of 70% compared with $70 billion in past years. Now, in the international construction cost ranking, Hong Kong has dropped to 9th in the world. I urge the governments to control the expenditure and timetable of major works projects better to avoid cost overrun. In terms of consultancy contracts, the government is the major customer of the sector. I hope government departments can review whether they can haggle the price with the consultancies firms and introduce new competitors to bring in competition. This will be an opportunity for the government to lower its expenditure on consultancy fees. There are views that the hours claimed by consultancy firms in capital works projects is too high. Sometimes the designs are unnecessarily complex, resulting in prohibitive construction costs. I suggest the government should establish a working group to review the efficiency of consultancy work to control the costs better. I also submit to support the motion and the amendment. Ms. Elizabeth Court. Deputy President, I speak in support of the motion. Our economy is under transformation. With the uncertainties in the international political and geopolitical situation, the revenue to the government is impacted. And we need to fully review the utilization of resources by various departments. We need to enhance administrative procedures and improve the revenue structure. Now, according to Article 107 in the Basic Law, the budget should be made so that expenditures kept within the limits of revenues. However, the situation has been worrying. Since 2019, the operating accounts and the general revenue accounts have recorded deficits. Now, in 2018, we had $1.1 trillion in reserve. However, it has dropped by half, equivalent only to 9 months of government expenditure. It shows that our fiscal position is faced with huge challenges. I have several suggestions to make. First of all, in terms of cutting expenditure, the government should further reduce recurrent expenditure in various departments. Now, besides the fiscal consolidation plan, the DAB urged the government to cut another 3% of recurrent expenditure, and also control capital works expenditure, defer projects with lower priority, and also enhance the function of the Development Bureau to give us more power to control the cost of capital works projects. The government should also review the functions and efficacy of government subvented bodies. Are all of these subvented services necessary? Subvention reduction should be imposed based on the findings, and for those organizations which have completed their historical mission, they should be dissolved. The government should also review the civil service establishments and redeploy manpower and remove obsolete positions. The government should embrace fully AI technology to save manpower cost and increase efficiency. Every year, Hong Kong is still paying billions of dollars to deal with asylum claims. Now, every year we spend more than $10 billion each year. It is pouring public money into the landfill. We need to deal with the situation. Now, there are still more than 10,000 torture claimants in Hong Kong, and there are hundreds of cases pending to be heard in court. We need to cut the queue. We cannot allow these people to abuse our judiciary resources. This is a serious wastage of resources. No savings we can make up for this waste. Now, in terms of creation of revenue stream, this is the responsibility of all departments. Departments should be responsible for promoting economic development. All departments should offer strategies and directions for promoting the development of industries. For example, adoption of new energy, innovative technologies, low-altitude economy, and so on. By removing red tape, we should further enhance the business environment of Hong Kong and increase the revenue items for the government. The government should also establish digitalization strategy for making Hong Kong the international logistics, trade, and financial center, which embrace Web 3.0. The Oasis should strike proactively to attract I&T companies waiting to be listed to come source funding in Hong Kong. We should also establish Hong Kong into an I&T hub to increase our momentum. Now, with the fiscal challenges, the government must be bold in reducing costs and improving the financial structure. Now, the DAB hopes that the government can work harder for the benefits of Hong Kong as a whole. Thank you. Professor Chen Wing-Kong. Thank you, Deputy President. I speak in support of the motion moved by Mr. Edmund Wong. We are looking forward to the budget, which will be announced by the end of this month. The consolidated deficit will be $100 billion for this year, much higher than the $481 billion estimated. This is the third consecutive year of fiscal deficits over $100 billion. If the situation persists, we may face the risk of having our credit lowered by agencies. I thank Mr. Edmund Wong for moving this timely motion so that we can discuss how the government can improve utilization of resources and improve its fiscal structure. By pooling our wisdoms, the government can better deal with the fiscal deficit. Now, the motion about comprehensively reviewing the government's use of resources, I think it is necessary. Every year, expenditure amounts to hundreds of billions of dollars. True, this will bring about quality public services to the public. However, there is a lot of room for improving the utilization of resources. I share the views with Ms. Elizabeth Court. For non-refoulement claimants, the government has taken a multi-pronged approach to deal with these claims. However, according to the CNSD, every year, The government has been spending more than $1 billion each year to deal with 40 non-refoulement claims. Just last year, we spent $800 million on these claims. Although we are a signatory to the convention and we have to fulfill our obligation, $1 billion is no small sum, especially when we have a $100 billion large fiscal deficit. We still have to spend $1 billion each year to deal with these fake torture claimants. Not only is it bad for the morale, it makes the government look like a fool. And we need to review the use of resources, especially on offering legal aid and humanitarian aid to fake torture claimants. We have to step up our safeguards to prevent abuse of the non-refoulement claim system. We have to address the issue at source and speed up dealing with the pent-up cases. We need to clear the waiting queue and also ensure that we are not wasting our money. Now, in the long run, to improve the fiscal position, we need to cut expenditure, but more importantly, we need to create new revenue items. The most practical way to do this is to make use of our advantages and improve our economy. We have unparalleled advantages in several areas. For example, Chinese medicine. We have one country, two systems, and also we are an international financial center. In terms of innovation in the area, as well as standard setting and research, we have obvious strengths. As long as we can tap these advantages, not only can we promote the development of CM in Hong Kong, Chinese medicine can also become a new growth point for Hong Kong's economy. For that purpose, I urge government departments to take up the responsibility to promote economic development and identify more growth points. Strategies should be set for promoting development of the industries so that we can diversify our economy and comprehensively review the fiscal structure of the government. Despite the challenges we face, there are also opportunities. As long as we work together to leverage on our strengths and make good use of our resources, we can turn these challenges into opportunities which can boost sustainable development of the economy. Thank you.
Mr. Jeffrey Lam. Thank you, Deputy President. Many citizens are concerned about the government's finances, and we need to make sure we are tackling the fiscal deficit that we have at the moment. We need to save every penny and make sure every penny is used fully. We need to enhance efficiency and maximize benefits brought to society. I, in principle, disagree that there should be a pay cut to the civil service because that will hurt civil service morale. In turn, that may endanger public welfare. We need to make sure we are making some good tools to enhance efficiency instead. We need to promote digitalization. We need to really catch up. We can make use of AI as a quick cure because it can help us with data analyses. It can provide administrative support, enhance efficiency, helping us save every penny. We can also ask DeepSeek because DeepSeek can give us some very good answers. In Hangzhou, they have made use of the city brain. With AI, they are able to analyze the city's data. They have made use of that to also enhance resource allocation. A friend from the business sector said, if we can make use of technology, we can save manpower as much as 30 to 40% of the manpower. We can see that technology can enhance efficiency. We should have the government learn from the business sector so that we can enhance efficiency. And with the first pilots, for example, we can see where we can allocate resources to achieve better resource allocation. I, however, think that the civil service establishment should be simplified, especially in areas where there is overlapping. With too much manpower, it may actually hurt efficiency instead. And if some positions are no longer needed, we should just let them be phased out naturally. We can again refer to the business sector's experience, seeing how we can make use of different models such as the contracting model for human resource management. We also need to develop new sources of revenue. We should try harder to attract businesses and investment. We need to streamline our workflow to make the process quicker. We should also listen to the views of the business sector because they are the engine of growth for the economy. They can often provide some very good advice. We should also provide more support to enterprises to introduce AI to enhance competitiveness. There should be some measures to boost consumption. We should strive for the support of the central authorities to have multi-entry visa arrangements to more cities in the GBA to have more tourists come to Hong Kong. We have all along been very good in identifying opportunities in challenges. If we are innovative and are willing to reform to enhance administrative efficiency to provide better public services to the citizens and work with the business sector to strive for the development of the economy, we can then thrive amidst the uncertainties we have so that we can remain a leader in the world and we can create a better future for citizens. President, 2025 is the right time for us to do this, to boost the economy. And I think with the leadership of the government, we will have more businesses and investment come to Hong Kong. We will have more manpower, more resources. And I think in 1 or 2 years, we should be able to reverse the fiscal deficit. I so submit. Dr. Simon Lee. Thank you, President. I thank Mr. Edmund Wong for raising this motion. As Mr. Edmund Wong said, our focus today should be on how the government can better make use of resources to enhance efficiency and how it can optimize its fiscal structure. I think the government should practice performance-based budgeting so that in the budget it will become a direction and a tool for reference of the government. And I said before that we should make sure there is sustainability of government finances. With the situation we face right now, it is perhaps the right timing to review our ways to make sure we are practicing good public finance. Performance-based budgeting means that we are systematically making use of data to make sure we're quantifying performance. According to OECD's 2023 figures, in the 33 member states interviewed, 70% of them are already making use of performance-based budgeting, such as the US, they already have an act on this, the UK also. But many countries are referring to such data, but they are not effectively linking that with their resource allocation. Right now, in Hong Kong, our fiscal structure is based on existing service provisions and future projections to formulate the budget for the next year. They haven't really linked this to the project's performance. In many papers of the government or in the administrative workflow, we have now set some KPIs. But these only refer to the quantity of services provided, not exactly the performance or effectiveness of the projects. And we have reviewed many works projects submitted by the government, and it seems to be the case that they are not linking it to performance. We recently scrutinized a Ma-on-shan joint user complex project, and they will construct an outdoor swimming pool as well as an indoor heated pool. Of course, these are comprehensive facilities. It is important to provide such. But then we haven't really seen in the paper the justifications of the government on specific figures on how many users may use the heated pool and other figures about how many users there are in the area using swimming pools. So that may not be as efficient as we would have liked such facilities. And we have recently looked into performance-based budgeting. In the mainland, they have had 20 years of experience practicing performance-based budgeting. They have achieved great results. And we are looking into the model adopted in the mainland. In the mainland, they make use of performance-based budgeting in their projections, and they would set performance targets. When needed, they will conduct in-depth, advanced, and post-analyses. And these analyses findings will affect the next cycle's budget. Some projects may even be cut. This would, however, make sure that resources are used effectively. So I suggest that the government should make sure we are setting performance-related indicators and link them to the budget and cut budgets that are not maximized in performance. We should also make sure all departments are setting quality targets to meet. This should help with the government in budgeting positively and to respond to the needs of society and members of the public and achieve cost effectiveness. I so submit. Mr. Chen Pulang, I thank Mr. Edmund Wong for raising the motion. Amidst uncertainties in the international environment, and we have already had 3 years of fiscal deficit, it is the right time for us to review the use of the government's resources, and there is a need to optimize the government's fiscal structure. We need to make sure we are striving for economic transformation and finding new engines for growth. But this is something in the long term. In the short term, we need to cut expenditure. We have had many cyclical fluctuations. We need to tackle the root cause of the problem, which is a narrow tax base. We have had many different new taxes to develop new sources of revenue, but we have not had a systematic review of the tax system for a long time. I urge the administration to undergo such review and consult the relevant stakeholders and members of the public to set up a blueprint for reform. We need to perhaps introduce new taxes such as sales taxes in order to ensure the financial sustainability of the government. We can issue bonds, and the bonds revenue will not be used in paying government expenditure. It will be used in investing in infrastructure. That is ideal. And in advanced economies, we still have a relatively low percentage of debt to GDP. So I think it's worth it to issue more bonds. On civil service, apart from maintaining zero growth in the establishment, another thing we can do is to simplify the government's civil service structure, especially in the directorate establishment. In the past 5 years, there is an increase of number of directorate positions in 72, and that is a 1.8-fold increase. and they are earning a lot, from 170,000 to 280,000. And that would mean for a $4 million increase in salaries per year. We have 95 directorate positions, and it's 6% of them. It would already involve $237 million. It's 19% of the expenditure. We should make use of existing manpower to take forward policies. Now, supernumerary positions can be for the period of 2 to 6 years. We should really review the effectiveness of supernumerary positions to see whether we need to allow positions to be extended. We have some positions extended for as long as 10 years. We really need to review whether there is a need for such supernumerary directorate positions, whether the duties and responsibilities can be dealt with by existing manpower. Mr. Tang Ka-piu said we should make good use of the strength of the third sector and innovative technologies. I very much agree. We need to review this situation, and we should promote the use of digital government services, enhancing efficiency and saving costs. In recent years, the government has been actively investing in infrastructure. In 2024, we have had $90.2 billion. Before, we would only spend about $70 billion, and that is a significant increase. We need to make sure we are practicing prudence and controlling the costs for public works projects. We need to control the progress to make sure we're achieving cost effectiveness. We should also have reference to the government's affordability and make sure we're delaying projects that are not exactly necessary at the moment. I so submit speaking in support of Mr. Edmund Wong's motion and Mr. Tang Ka-piu's amendment. Mr. Tony Zhe.
President, the land premium revenue this financial year will stand at $8 billion plus, down from more than $100 billion previously. And this is one of the contributing factors to the fiscal deficit. But as I said on other occasions, the major problem lies in the fact that the government's recurrent expenditure has been increasing too dramatically over the years. And this is causing the fiscal deficit. Myself and the 19 members are of the view that we should cut spending and go back to the BL principle of keeping expenditure within the limits of revenues and control expenditure. The G19 met the Financial Secretary regarding the 25-26 budget. We have put forward 8 recommendations. In the interest of time, I'd like to focus my attention on 3 spending cut measures. First, we should enhance the productivity enhancement package. Instead of 1% cut in annual savings, we should have no more than 5% for 2 years. Now, if implemented, this would achieve a savings of $20 billion for the government. And this is no significant amount, but this is recurrent expenditure. It would have implications on all the subsequent years going forward. This spending cut on the part of the departments would be better than a pay cut for the civil service, because this would incentivize the departments to examine room for spending cut. And also we can re-engineer the work process. We can review the obsolete services and the use of innovation and technology and outsourcing. These are also other means for the government to provide quality services to the public. And these will also reduce the wasteful use of taxpayers' money. President, many statutory bodies are also offering some room for streamlining. G19 second recommendation is to review all the subsidized bodies and funds and look at their KPIs. There should be a streamlining of the manpower, and the obsolete services should be ceased. In the past, the obstructionists tended to engage in filibustering, and the NGOs, subsidized NGOs, will have to reserve a lot more resources to avert the absence of funding because of filibustering. Now, this risk has become well and truly gone. I think the excess funding should be clawed back for better use. The third recommendation by G19 is to improve the point system. With the increase in seniority, the civil servants would be increasing in the pay points, and they will get high pay for their seniority. But as time goes by, it doesn't matter whether the civil servants are performing well enough, and they will be enjoying the pay point rise up to 4% pay rise. And I think this system should be revamped. We should have a system whereby we reward the good performance by offering pay points, and that would also enable us to reduce the spending. For the details, I am only too delighted to talk to you in great detail on this application. But in the interest of time, I pause here. I support the motion. Mr. Chen Yong. Thank you, President. And this is the 15th day of the Lunar New Year, and we hope that we can have harmony. We hope that we are going to be having a robust finance for all families and also for Hong Kong. I support Mr. Edmund Wong's motion to optimize the fiscal structure by reviewing the government's use of resources. I'm also grateful to Mr. Bill Tang for the amendments. Basically, optimizing the fiscal reserves means that we should cut the red tape. We should tap new funding sources and cut spending. Now, the evil politicians in the U.S. are cracking down on Hong Kong. I think we have to adopt a new mindset. We should have new ideas, as alluded to by Director Sa Baolong. So the southern visit by Mr. SAR is actually intended to push Hong Kong to feel economic growth and achieve tangible results. The DAB puts forward some wishes regarding the budget. We should identify new sources of funding and cut spending. The first four, I'd like to talk about the spending cut. With the same amount of money, can we achieve more? Can we do more with less? Like in a household, you have to put food on the table. That's the core item. But what about the renovation? What about the extra items of clothing in the wardrobe and a new car? Now, all these can be dispensed with during financial stringency. There are departments that are doing pretty well. Now, at the ESC meeting this morning, the Director of Health has been doing a good job, and they have to create certain posts, and this will be beneficial to Hong Kong, but they are also cutting certain posts and making it achieving a saving to the tune of $2 million. This is something that we should give them a pat on the back. And by cutting spending, we can contribute to the reduction of deficit. Now, as to tapping new sources of revenue, the CSTB is promoting the ocean park. Now, this is a money spinner with all the pandas there. Each year, we can achieve $5 billion to $10 billion. The ocean park can, by dint of the pandas, increase the revenue and reduce the expenditure. In a way, they will also be able to tap new sources of revenue for Hong Kong. And there are many departments that can tap new funding, like the ICAC. They have designated a coffee shop in the corner of their premises. And this is taxpayers' money, and they should be held up an example for other departments to follow suit. If we can pull together to reduce the deficit, then I'm sure that we can optimize the fiscal structure. RTHK, for instance, they have a very good spectrum. Maybe they can introduce some commercials or some advertising to bring in revenue for the government. In the U.S., they are investigating this, that, and the others. They are still beset with a colossal deficit. That we're more lucky. We're luckier than them in a way. Now, for the construction, we are sticking to the European standard, but we are using the mainland materials. I think something can be done about it to achieve savings. So the key thing is to tap new sources of revenue, cut spending in order to achieve a better efficiency. Mr. Shang Huilong, I wish you a happy 15th day of the new year. There's going to be a deficit of $100 billion. I've made 10 recommendations to improve the fiscal structure in order to tap new sources and manage costs. First, we have to clear out the zombie projects. The government should have determination to get rid of all the zombie projects. For the projects that are obsolete, they should be removed. I am the president of the TTP Association. I'm concerned about the talent policy in Hong Kong. Now, the government has still keeping the tech task program. Over the past 7 years, we have only attracted 500 people. Now, this is very much an obsolete zombie project. I think the immigration department staff can be diverted to somewhere else. Now, there are other projects for which DVD will have to be submitted, and the government, the DPO can certainly introduce some technology there. And also, about a year or so ago, I was the first one to suggest that for mainland talents to come to Hong Kong, they do experience some funding problems, and this is affecting their chances of setting up business. So we should really identify solutions there. I have put a written question in 2023. The FSTB has addressed my question a year on. Has the administration address the problem? I think these new talents should be offer some assistance in the funding need to create their own business. Third, we should promote the escalation or elevation of Hong Kong's intellectual financial center status. We are ranking third in the world. I think we have to improve our competitiveness there. In 2025, in 2025, I think Hong Kong enterprises can have a secondary listing. We should attract more big cap enterprises to come to Hong Kong and buttress Hong Kong's position as an international financial center. We should take advantage of our advantage there. Fourth, we should have the trophy for Hong Kong enterprises. We have a lot of R&D, but they're not commercialized. There is room for improvement there. In the mainland, different provinces and municipalities, they do have the award for innovation projects. But in Hong Kong, there is no award like this. So this is a good idea, the Golden Award for Innovative Technology. I think the award should be as much as $10 billion. And the new quality production forces should be one of the criteria for assessing the awardees. We should pursue excellence and attract the top-notch talents. I am a strategic advisor of a tech company in Hong Kong. This is something I have to declare. Hong Kong is facing the financial challenges right now, but with our resilience and robustness, we would be able to turn the crisis into opportunities as long as we're coming together and map out the future with foresight. I'm sure that we should be able to restore our fiscal balance and maintain the well-being of Hong Kong and make Hong Kong shine again as a pearl of the Orient. I support the motion and the amendments.
Mr. Andrew Lam. Thank you, President. First of all, I thank Mr. Edmund Wong for moving this motion so that we can put forward our views on the cusp of the budget. The Financial Secretary said this year we will have a fiscal deficit of $100 billion. It has caused a lot of debate in society. There are suggestions for reviewing the $2 transport subsidy scheme and also freeze the civil service pay and review the civil service pay structure. Now, these are all on cutting expenditure. However, creation of revenue is also important. Changing the fiscal structure needs time and resources. Now, with the downward economic cycle, we need to consider the risk appetite of the sector and also the resilience of the grassroots. That's why I support the government to maintain an expansionary fiscal policy through bond issuance and continue to invest in construction, infrastructure, and training of talents. We need to speed up the transformation of the economy and consolidate our competitiveness. Under the principle of use of affordable users' pay, the government should review the expenditure on social welfare services and items. We should not adopt an across-the-board or broad-brush approach. We need to provide help to those in need. For example, in terms of promoting strategical projects, we need to consider the priority and urgency of capital works projects and also the standards to ensure that money is well spent. For those projects which require long-term maintenance and repair, for example, railings along the road and also a public wet market, we need to revisit whether these are urgent and necessary. Now, I'm concerned about the operation of government funds. Earlier on, concerning funds under the government, I have submitted a written question to the government to express my concern. Today, I've just received the reply from the government. From the reply, however, I can see that the government hasn't changed its mindset. They have just repeated their stance to me. It says the controlling officer will conduct timely review on the efficacy of the funds and taking consideration of the stakeholders' views and also the objectives of the fund. Various arrangements will be considered, for example, merger of funds and also taking forward the relevant policy initiatives with other means to ensure flexibility of policy measures. Now, there are 2 sports funds with no expenditure for 9 consecutive years. However, for 5 funds, expenditure outweighs revenue. For example, the Qualification Framework Fund, the gap was $60 million. Now, for Students Allowance Fund and also the Language Fund, the gap has also widened. These examples show that the government lacks a mechanism to ensure the efficient utilization of public resources. If the government adhere to the old mindset to conduct the so-called regular review on the fund, how many more decades do we need to eliminate the fiscal deficit? The mechanism has failed. The government must pay more efforts to revisit the 42 funds together with the controlling officers. It doesn't take 10 years' time to review the operation of the 42 funds. If we can't do that, how can we address the fiscal deficit? In general, in terms of civil service, we need to freeze the pay but not reduce the pay. For civil servants and principal officials, in dealing with fiscal deficits, I hope they won't be as careless as their reply given to me. They need to show resolve in addressing the issue. I so submit to support the motion and the amendment moved by Mr. Tang. Mr. Kissen-Yang, thank you, President. This is the third year we have a $100 billion large fiscal deficit because of geopolitical pressure and also economic volatility and changes in population structure. Now, we support the government using bond issuance to relieve the financial burden. I have been urging the government to allow MPF account holders to use their MPF accumulated amounts to purchase bonds. Now, this is a perpetuity bond. The government only needs to pay out the interest to the account holders, and with the income, the government can use them to promote infrastructure development. Now, the four major sources of revenue is land sales revenue, investment return, and so on. Now, with land sales revenue, it has dropped to less than $10 billion. For stamp duty, it has dropped to some $40 to $60 billion from the peak. The government must revitalize our stock and financial markets. We need to salvage investors' confidence. As long as the property markets and the stock market is vibrant, we can relieve the pressure on the fiscal burden. Now, we have been paying more on education and health. It shows that there is huge demand for these services. Reducing expenditure on these items would stunt the growth of our economy. Rather than creating new tax items, we need to have a more healthy mindset and save where we can save. Now, the expenditure on civil service pay amounted to some $100 billion, accounting for 1/4 of the government's expenditure. Now, many civil service unions have expressed that they are willing to take a pay freeze. Now, just by the pay increment system alone, they can enjoy a significant pay rise every year. That's very good already. However, reduction of salary for the civil service would weaken the confidence in the market. So I urge the government not to reduce civil service pay. Now, the government should also enhance the administrative efficiency. With AI technology, the government has been using ChatGPT to answer inquiries. Now, with advancement in technologies, we can streamline the process and reduce manpower costs. We should also be careful in creation of new posts, especially supernumerary directorate posts. We need to review the resources deployments in various departments to ensure that we can meet the public's aspiration. Another big expenditure item is capital works expenditure. Over the past 6 years, the amount has increased to $90 billion from $60 billion. I believe it will exceed $100 billion soon. Now, we are famous for our slow work schedule and costly construction work. Now, by using technologies and advanced materials, we can reduce the cost on capital works items. It would be best if we can save 10 to 20% in terms of capital works projects. That will translate into $10 to $20 billion of saving each year. Now, if we can do a good job in terms of cutting expenditure and creating revenue, we don't have to touch education and healthcare. I would like to speak about the $2 transport subsidy scheme. Many elderly people told me that the $2 transport fare concession scheme should be maintained. Otherwise, elderly people will be homebound and they will become sick, and that will add to our healthcare expenditure and hurts the silver economy. Now, I have submitted a proposal to the government to address the issue of elderly people taking long-haul routes for short trips. We need to charge different journeys separately. This will allow us to keep the $2 scheme and help the elderly people. Now, with the changes in international and regional circumstances, the country has adopted an expansionary fiscal policy. For example, enhancing investment and also issuing more super long-term sovereignty bonds. So we don't have to be too pessimistic about the situation. Austerity doesn't mean cutting spending altogether. We need to keep investing in items which will help the city grow. I also submit to support the motion and the amendment. Mr. Bill Tang. President, I speak in support of Mr. Edmund Wong's motion and the amendment. As the 18th third plenary session, the President mentioned clearly that fiscal management is the foundation of the country. Now, Hong Kong is a part of China, so fiscal prudence is also important. While saving costs, can we also have revenue creation measure? Now, according to the media, Trump just announced that one employee would be hired only after 4 redundancies have been made. Now, when a new regulation is introduced, 2 existing regulations should be cancelled. I'm not saying we should copy his move, but we should make reference to his mindset. Like Chairman Mao said, we can learn from the West and apply them in our context. Although Trump is not friendly to our country, we need to learn what's good about him. Now, in imposing a expenditure saving measure, we need to have the equivalent revenue creation measure. I'm talking about measures which can boost the economy as a whole. Now, if the government is minded to cut expenditure on education, can we, on the other hand, promote the study in Hong Kong brand and study tools in Hong Kong? Can we apply for measures from the country to attract more students to come to Hong Kong to study so as to boost the property market and also the retail and catering market? There are also rumors that the government is going to cut spending on healthcare. If that's the case, can we have measures which can promote healthcare tourism in Hong Kong? Without affecting our healthcare system, can we learn from Japan and Singapore and develop a high-end healthcare tourism industry? Now, without copying Trump, we need to adopt a similar mindset to create revenue sources and boost the economy. Second, value for money. In last October, reports 313 from the Director of Audit conducted an audit on several government departments and subvented organizations. It included some education items where objectives were not met. Now, this value for money audit, can we extend the scope of this audit beyond the Director of Audit's report? That is just a selective exercise. We need to conduct a comprehensive value for money audit on all expenditure items in the estimates. That will give the council as well as the public a chance to scrutinize expenditure item, whether it is a few $1 million or hundreds of billions of dollars. Whether an equivalent benefit is brought to the economy and society as a whole. Now, we need to be selective in our cost-cutting measure. In the past, all departments were required to impose cost-saving measures to the equivalent of 5%, but we can have a more niche approach. Say, for example, under the education, there is tertiary education and primary and secondary education. We need to differentiate the magnitude of cost cuts in various sectors. The principle is value for money. Premier Wen Jiabao once said that the fiscal history for a country or a province is usually very worrying and scary. Now, when it comes to cost saving, of course, everyone would be worried and scared. However, like the government said, Director Xia Baolong mentioned that we need to break away from the old mindset. We need to embrace reforms and continue to be innovative. I hope that the upcoming budget will provide some new thinking in terms of creating revenues and cost cutting. Despite a scary journey, we need not fear.
Dr. Johnny President, I speak in support of Mr. Edmund Wong's motion. I also thank him for giving us this opportunity to discuss fiscal issues. With uncertainties in the international environment, we need to be innovative. We have seen great changes in the fiscal structure or economic structure. We had a highly centralized economy, and that proves to not be sustainable. We should really conform to the principle in Article 107 of the Basic Law. We should make sure we keep the expenditure within the limits of revenues in drawing up its budget and achieve a fiscal balance. Therefore, there is a need to review our use of resources and optimize the government's fiscal structure to face the challenges ahead. To optimize the fiscal structure, there should be three principles. We need to make sure we are not delaying the pace of economic recovery. We shouldn't affect the daily lives of people. We also should not see a significant increase in administrative costs to ensure sustainability. With the reviewing of resource allocation, it is to make sure we are effectively using resources. On cutting expenditure, we need to review policy bureaus and departments' distribution of work to make sure there's no overlapping work. We need to simplify the government structure and cut any processes that are not necessary. We also need to ask civil servants to enhance efficiency. We can perhaps appoint a private sector personnel to be leading the efficiency work of the government. We are only cutting 1% of the government expenditure every year with the proposed fiscal consolidation program, but then some have doubts as to whether that is enough. And according to media reports and government's figures, the Finance Committee has already extended or retained supernumerary directorate positions in the number of 49, and that would alone cost $100 million. Some positions have been there for as long as 10 years. There is a need for us to review that. We should also stop departments from hiring new people. I think for the next 5 years, we should at least cut 10% of manpower. We should also plan ahead and develop new sources of government revenue. We have a simple tax system, but we are over-reliant on land sale revenue. We should have more diversified structure. We need to make adjustments to salaries tax and profits tax. In order to develop new sources of revenue, we can set up a committee to consult on the widening of tax base and have professionals give advice on how we can do that in order to increase government revenue. We also need to think about new taxes that would have low administrative costs. We have government charging much less than what is in the private sector. There's a need to review the fee structure of the government. We need to, of course, consider whether the grassroots can afford such fees. We should make sure we are adopting the users pay principle as well as the affordable users pay principle. For some LCSE venue fees or rental fees in 2013, that is 12 years ago, they have remained unchanged. such as some air-conditioned basketball courts. It will only cost $60 to $148 per hour, and this alone wouldn't even cover the electricity fees. We need to also promote diversity of the economy. We need to invest more in innovation and technology, attract more businesses and investors to come to Hong Kong so as to boost our economy. We need to relax our restrictions to further develop Web 3.0 so that it can even boost the economy even more so that we can develop a digital economy. We need to be ambitious in optimizing fiscal structures so that we can keep pace with the times. I so submit. Mr. Robert Lee. Thank you, President. It is expected that in the next 3 years we would have over $100 billion in fiscal deficit. We have only now $660 billion in fiscal reserves. We have many uncertainties in the international environment that will also cause a pressure on the economy. In the motion, it says that we should review the government's use of resources to optimize its fiscal structure. This would definitely help us with dealing with the current difficult situation. I have 3 comments to make on increasing government revenue. It is important to revitalize the capital market. If we do well in finance, it can help develop the other industries and in turn boost the economy. We had the Hang Seng Index increase by 18% last year, and it has brought about $21.8 billion in revenue. In October of last year, we have seen a prosperous market, and that alone has already brought $8.1 billion in stamp duty revenue, and that is more than tax rebates in $6 billion. We have seen the Hong Kong stock market do very well, and it is an indicator of the economic performance of Hong Kong. Apart from it bringing stamp duty revenue as well as benefits in the exchange fund, it will also bring some incentives to the public. If they earn money in the stock market, they will also consume more. In turn, that would boost the economy. On boosting liquidity, the government has a number of measures, including the lowering of stamp duty, and there is also enhancement in certainties in the system. There's also the capital investment entrance scheme. To further boost investor confidence, I urge the administration to refer to the central authorities' example to boost mid to long-term investment. We have many associated bodies that have great resources. Say in the Treasury institutions, they have $100 billion in reserves. For the UGC, the university, they have $46 billion in reserves. And the hospital authority also has approximately $10 billion in reserves. I think it is time for us to review the resources that public bodies have. We should probably have more fund managers manage the relevant resources to make sure we have some funds that may be allocated for medium to long-term investment. I also urge the administration to set up a corporate version of I Am Smart so that government departments can share data with businesses and vice versa. This would simplify procedures and enhance efficiency. On saving administrative costs, the government should make good use of technologies. In 2023, Singapore worked with tech enterprises to make use of AI to deal with administrative work. If we refer to other jurisdictions' examples, we can perhaps also work with tech enterprises so that we can, under the PEP Productivity Enhancement Program, we can still save costs. We can save costs and enhance efficiency that will help with the fiscal problems. But the government should also think about boosting the stock and capital markets to boost the income of the public, and in the long term that will increase government revenue. President, I speak in support of the motion and the amendment. I so submit. Thank you. Mr. Rock Chen, I speak in support of Mr. Edmund Wong's motion. We are now going through a structural change with geopolitics. We have a fiscal deficit that would be less than $100 billion, and we will only have $640 billion in fiscal reserves. That would only be enough for 10 months of government expenditure. In order to ensure fiscal sustainability, we need to review the relevant rules and legislation to see if we can relax restrictions and streamline the processes for vetting various applications. We can also simplify regulatory regimes and enhance administrative efficiency by enhancing departmental coordination to save manpower and enhance efficiency. We have been trying to reprioritize different work processes. We can perhaps make use of AI and robotics to boost productivity so that we can allocate resources to other duties that would not only simplify the workflow, that would also enhance efficiency. We also need to review how the establishment of the government is. We need to make restructuring if necessary, so that we wouldn't have to create or retain that many supernumerary positions. Under the existing mechanism, we have many government and statutory bodies that are regulators or enforcers. When we are striving for economic development, we should try to encourage statutory and public bodies to have more measures to develop industries. We should also set performance indicators and evaluate performance annually. When faced with such a difficult fiscal position, we need to review capital works expenditure. We need to make sure we have our priorities right. The DAB also suggests that the Steering Committee of Development Control should report directly to the Financial Secretary. They will work like an audit department of a private company that will help us save costs. Not only do we need to cut expenditure, we should also develop new sources of government revenue. We should allow the Jockey Club to have more events to bet on. Not only will that combat illegal betting, it will also increase our revenue in bets and sweepstakes. And there are some estimates. If we have basketball betting tax, we will have an increase of $1.5 billion in revenue in bets and sweepstakes. I urge the administration to review the clawback mechanism and formula of the exchange fund. I have done some research myself. I found that starting from 2017 to 18 to 2024-25, so within 8 years, the recurrent expenditure of the government has increased by 56%, but then the clawback mechanism has maintained its system in 2007, which was 18 years ago. Since we're at this critical stage of the fiscal position of the government, without compromising the operations of the exchange fund, we should review whether the mechanism and the formula still works for the current situation. I so submit, speaking in support of the original motion and the amendment. Professor William Wong.
President, I thank Mr. Edmund Wong for moving this motion so that prior to the budget, we would have an opportunity to have some discussions on optimizing the fiscal structure and offer our advice for the administration. Hong Kong experienced financial turmoil, the dot-com bust and SARS epidemic. We managed to bounce back from these negativities. Some years back, we were beset with the COVID. Now we expected the economy to recover afterwards, but things don't pan out as expected. We are facing a deficit of $100 billion. Now, of course, we have to contemplate new funding sources and spending cuts. Previously, the robust real estate and stock market yielded an awful lot of resources and revenue for the government. Now this is not the case anymore. So we have to identify new economic growth points, and we cannot talk about new economic growth without talking about new quality productive forces. Hong Kong has a very strong potential for innovation and technology, and it took us a long time to get the ITIB up and running, and it's only now with all the patriots running Hong Kong that we managed to do the catching up. There is a lot to do to catch up. One of them is the commercialization of the R&D outcomes. The universities in Hong Kong are very good at R&D, but there is a very limited commercialization. We have the Raise Plus scheme to commercialize the R&D outcomes. But many from the tertiary institutions are telling me that the progress in the scheme is plodding far too slowly, and there are many who are considering quitting because of the exceedingly slow process. I know the government is suffering from limited resources, but I think we have to review the existing establishments. There are some obsolete posts that should be deleted. We should put the resources where we need. I&T is the path that we have to go down. The government has rolled out various funds to promote I&T development, but there is a pain point where there is a lack of access to the mainland. I think we should have a part of the fund devoted to the cooperation with the mainland, and we should also resolve the problem of mainland funding making their way to Hong Kong. There should be uninterrupted flow of funding from the mainland. Now, recently, we see the development of DeepSeek, and this is really a top-notch big language model. And it is an open source app. The government should take full advantage of using DeepSeek to develop systems for digital government services in order to reduce the financial burden from manpower resources. And we should apply new quality productive forces and use this to various areas in Hong Kong. I support the motion. Mrs. Regina Ip. Thank you, President. I thank Mr. Edmund Wong and Mr. Bill Tang for moving the motion and the amendment. Hong Kong is running a colossal deficit, and the reserves are really being depleted. This is against BL 107, and this is also undermining our ability to withstand any financial storms. The motion is telling us that we should not simply focus our attention on cutting spending on livelihood issues. Rather, we have to look at the government's overall spending. Like Reverend Kuhn said, the civil service spending is well over $100 billion. We have 7 million people. We have 190,000 civil servants. In Singapore, they have 5 million people and 80,000 civil servants. The large civil service and high pay should be reviewed. Over the years, the pay has been creeping up mechanically, and there are certain grades that are higher in pay than the private sector. Let's take AO, for instance. The starting pay is $60,000 odd dollars, $61,000 odd dollars, and this is higher than that paid by Jardine, Swire, and HSBC for the management trainees. My understanding is that the MTs share similar nature of work, and they get paid $30,000. I'm sure that if they get paid, the AO, if they get paid $40,000, we will be able to train a lot of people. And for the first couple of years, they are actually under training. Why is it that they should get paid $61,000 odd dollars? I took it up with the administration, but I was told that the pay structure would be under review every 6 years. So this great review will not be undertaken willy-nilly. And for the EO, it is $30,000. Now for the CO, clerical officers, they are from 16 to 21. The starting pay is $35,000, and these are not university graduates. In the private sector, they get paid $17,000, $18,000 on the outside, and the civil servants are getting paid higher than in the private sector. And like COs, we have 3,000 or so in numbers. Now, previously, the COs will have to create the files. Now things have gone digital. Do we really need so many clerical officers to manage the files? Now we also have the official languages officers. The starting pay is $32,000. Now we said that the government should harness technology with DeepSeek. We can do a lot of translation with good performance. Do we really need so many OLOs? And even COs, personal secretaries, do we need such a big complement of staff? We're not simply talking about across the board pay cut. The pay, overall pay is actually $100 million, and 10% will not yield a great deal. Like Director SAR said, we should be bold enough to be innovative. We should review the pay structure. If they are too unwieldy, they should be cut back on. Should the top officers be accompanied by a personal secretary, an admin assistant, a political assistant, an IO, and there is a big complement of staff serving the official, and also can share the chauffeurs or the government drivers. It's not simply a question of making a pay cut. The obsolete practice should be reviewed. Ms. Yunis Yong, President, I rise to speak in support of Mr. Edmund Wong's motion to review the use of resources and to optimize the fiscal structure. Hong Kong is facing severe financial challenges. We're running a severe deficit. The external situation is complex and volatile. We're under a lot of pressure, so the government has to manage its finances prudently. We have to make sure that we're going to be able to achieve financial sustainability. The government can approach this from various angles. There should be more foreign direct investment being attracted to Hong Kong. The Secretary has reached out to the Middle East, as the mainland and the Middle East are enjoying closer ties. There are more and more Middle Eastern investors who would like to come to Hong Kong or mainland markets. The government should seize the opportunity in the GPA, which should highlight or showcase Hong Kong's unique advantage and provide more convenience for these investors to make their way into the mainland. There should be a platform created for this purpose with one-stop support so that the Middle East investors can make their way to Hong Kong and boost revenue here. The government should also take full advantage of the vast market in the GPA and create or tap into new sources of revenue. As the GPA is getting integrated, the flow of capital, people, and commodities is getting more frequent. We should take advantage of financial trade centers, and we should take advantage of this engine and liaise with the mainland authorities to provide more opportunities for the businesses. This will stimulate Hong Kong's economic growth and boost our taxation. In terms of public services, there should be more cooperation between Hong Kong and the main GPA cities, in particular in terms of health care. Many people are heading north for medical treatment, but there is a lack of package. People will have to do the run around. If we can have the right policy formulated for the sharing of healthcare resources, not only with this relieve the burden on Hong Kong and curb the growth of expenditure, it will also open up more opportunities for the private sector and enhance the competitiveness. In the GPA, we should offer the subsidized program for Hong Kong people using the healthcare services in the GPA to facilitate the use of services there. The New People's Party did contribute views to the FS regarding the traffic penalty. Mr. Edmund Wong referred to this a moment ago. At the present moment, for the traffic contravention, speeding, running a red light, the penalty is actually lower than that in other jurisdictions. In 2023, illegal parking, the fine attracts $900 million. Now, it is $320 since a long time back. It has not been adjusted for quite a while. And the cost of living has gone up so much, and the fine is actually lagging far behind. If we can review this speeding contravention of traffic offenses like jumping red light and so on, if we can increase the penalty, it would bring about revenue for the coffers. The community is diverse in their views in this regard, but the government has to strike a balance then and come up with a proposal for discussion. As to INT, the government should introduce AI, streamline the work process, increase efficiency. There are certain processes like the vetting of forms and the analysis of data. This can be left to the AI. I think the government should deploy AI to reduce manpower resources. Given the financial stringency, the government has to be bold enough and embrace new ideas, new mindset to ride over these difficulties. Thank you.
Dr. Wendy Hong. President, I speak in support of Mr. Edmund Wong's motion. In 2 weeks' time, the Finance Secretary will deliver the budget. We all know that the fiscal position this year is tight. We need to boost revenue and cut costs rapidly. I'm not very optimistic about achieving the balance within 3 years' time. The difficulty in public finance reflects a series of deep-rooted issues we have in our society. Minor patchwork measures cannot address these problems. We need to conduct a comprehensive reform to address these deep-rooted issues. We should set a 10-year roadmap of reform to adjust our fiscal structure and move towards fiscal balance. I have several points to suggest today. First of all, creating new revenue streams. Now, relying on public money to establish Hong Kong as an international education hub is unsustainable. We should gradually resume charging the full fee for local university undergraduates on a cost recovery basis. And for those with financial issues, we can give them financial support. And with scholarship, we can attract the top talents in the Belt and Road countries to Hong Kong. Second, reducing construction costs for our capital works projects. Our works are slow and costly. Our cost is 5 to 10 times as high as those in Shenzhen. We have an overcomplicated and over-stringent vetting system. Now, to play safe, civil servants would play by the book and enforce the standards and requirements too stringently so as to strangle emerging technologies. Now, the safety coefficients adopted are usually much higher than necessary. Third, we need to cut expenditure on welfare. Our labor participation rate is 10% lower than Singapore, Macau, and Shenzhen. Compared with Japan and ultra-aged society, our labor participation rate is 6% lower than them. Many elderly people who can still work are staying home instead of working. We need to address this issue. Now, the sandwich class, the living standard is lower than those living in public housing and those receiving benefits. It undermines social mobility and lock up labor potential. It also gives rise to astronomical sum of welfare spending. Now, for public residential housing estates, we need to give these resources to those actually in need and also encourage and incentivize those who are capable to move away from the welfare system. Now, old age living expenses for elderly people has increased from some $30 billion to $50 billion last year. It has increased by 47%. The figure is soon to exceed $100 billion. Now, we need to cut costs. Otherwise, the next generation will not be able to take care of the previous generation. Now, the ratio of property ownership is much lower than Singapore. In Singapore, they have a 90% property ownership rate. Major cities in the country, Shanghai and Beijing, also over 90%. A lot of people are renting a house. However, many landlords are reluctant to rent their properties out to elderly people. Then the elderly people will have to return to the queue to wait for public housing resources and also rely on welfare. Now, we need to drastically enhance the ratio of property ownership in Hong Kong so that this can become another pillar of retirement protection. Finally, civil service pay. The ratio of civil servants to population is much higher than that in Singapore, 60% higher than them. We need to slim down the establishments. Thank you. Dr. Tan Ka-piu, President. Now, the Financial Secretary is canvassing views for the upcoming budget. Now, this is a good time for us to discuss how we can optimize the fiscal structure of the government. I support the motion. Now, according to the basic law, the budget must follow the principle of keeping expenditure within the limits of revenues and achieve fiscal balance. Now, the major sources of revenue is land sale premium and taxation. Now, because of external volatilities and geopolitical tension, we are facing some headwind. Now, the transformation of our economy cannot be achieved in one day's time. Growth has slowed down, while emerging industries are still growing. It takes time for us to turn things around. Luckily, we have a large exchange fund reserve, and also the debt to GDP ratio is low. We are still within the safety margin. In the long run, we can still be confident in our fiscal health. Now, for the challenges we face, the government must adopt some measures in the short, medium, and long run to optimize the fiscal structure. In the short run, the government must launch cost-saving measures and support the poor in a more targeted manner. In the long run, we need to nurture IMP and emerging industries and use our financial sector to support transformation of the economy. On cost-saving measures, the government should conduct a review on the existing subsidy and allowance schemes. Besides the $2 transport fare concession scheme, there is also other allowances which need to be reviewed. For example, the $19 billion subsidies to offer a one-off $2,500 allowance to primary and kindergarten students to relieve pressure on the family. It is not a means-tested scheme. Starting from 2020, it has been implemented. Now, the original intent of the allowance scheme is to relieve financial burden. It has been made regularized instead of a one-off scheme. Now, to many wealthy families, it is not very meaningful. It is against the principle of targeted poverty relief. Now, with a more targeted approach, the government can save spending while giving help to the most needed. On the other hand, we need to utilize market tools and financial tools to subsidize the budget. For example, mega events, the investment ratio between the government and the private sector can be adjusted. For example, we can invite sponsors and charitable donations from sponsors to sponsor the activities. Now, for example, we can invite the GBA Infrastructure Development Bank to provide low-cost financing options for our infrastructure projects. In terms of financial development, the financial industry is one of our pillar industries that there is strive to promote the development of RMB trading ecosystem in Hong Kong, and also there are lots of medium to long-term measures. Then we need to enhance the listing regime to increase the number of companies listed in Hong Kong. And also we need to lower the eligibility threshold for Wealth Connect scheme from $500,000 from $5 million to $400,000. We need to also speed up the development of regulatory regime for family offices in Hong Kong. The establishment of a financial hub and a financing hub should be given equal balance. This will enhance government taxation revenue. I support the motion and the amendment. Professor Priscilla Leung. President, I speak in support of the motion on comprehensively reviewing the SAR government's use of resources to optimize its fiscal structure. In my view, the $100 billion large fiscal deficit, the poor economy, and the treacherous geopolitical landscape, it needs the government's wisdom to overcome these challenges. Now, there are 3 points I would like to make. creating revenue, cost-cutting, and rebuilding confidence. Pardon me, President. In terms of revenue creation, cost-cutting, and rebuilding confidence, we can't just focus on the first two. Rebuilding confidence is also important. Of course, I agree with other members' views that a structural reform is called for concerning the, say, civil service. But in terms of revenue creation, we need to make major investments. Now, the Hong Kong Investment Corporation only has $60 billion in assets. Temasek in Singapore has some $20 billion in assets. We need to focus on the long-term investment return. Now, the Nanjing government has conducted a review on why they lost to Hangzhou. In Hangzhou, they have Alibaba, DeepSeek. The Hangzhou provincial government is willing to take risk. They are willing to invest in the future. Now, there are views that we need to cut expenditure on education. For education, I think we can save some resources. However, in terms of research and industry developments, we can't cut costs. We have the $10 billion Raise Plus scheme. Compared with other places, they invest hundreds of billions of dollars into research and commercialization of products. Now, in terms of raising tax, the government must be prudent and disciplined. We can't change the simple low tax regime. I think Articles 107 and 108 are wise. Hong Kong's competitiveness relied on the low and simple tax regime compared with other countries. I don't agree with the progressive tax regime, but we can consider betting duty. Maybe we can even introduce competition into the betting industry. These will not affect our tax regime. And also, issuance of bonds, healthy bonds. For example, in the Yau Chi Mong district, for example, the redevelopment plan for the flower market, we can invite participation from the retail investors so that they can share the bonus from the investment. We can crowdfund these projects. There are many good projects which didn't delay or even kill them because of the fiscal deficit. Lastly, we need to be precise. You need to have a precise target of, say, 5% saving in public expenditures. For individual departments, you need to give some flexibility to the controlling officers. Now, there is a bid to establish a smart government, and I also like the idea of low-altitude economy. The controlling officer must be given the freedom to create necessary posts based on needs. Now, the efforts must be precise and smart. Cost reduction can't address all problems. Lastly, we need to invest in our soft power. We need to rebuild trust internally, externally. Please stop speaking. Mr. Stephen Ho.
Thank you, President. I speak in support of the motion on comprehensively reviewing the SAR government's use of resources to optimize its fiscal structure. Well, I don't have a lot of time and I don't want to repeat what others have said. I just want to make two major points. The SAR government has about 190,000 civil servants working for it. It's hard for the government to change its mindset entirely. However, I think we have to, from bottom to top, change civil servants' mentality and change the relations between productivity as well as results. If you want to name one bureau that can make money, it might be the CEDB. Other departments or bureaus, they don't make a lot of money. I'm more familiar with the AFCD. It mostly regulates crops and agricultural products. It could perhaps increase people's licensing fees, but it can't make a lot of money. If you want to increase revenue, well, government departments in general don't have the incentives to do so. If we want to increase revenue, we have to make civil servants more proactive. Can you make the money earned go back to the civil servants or the departments themselves? You have to ensure that each department can help revive the economy. You hire civil servants, for example, to work in the marine department. It is not in charge of the economic growth, so you have to have dedicated departments helping these departments to increase revenue. Also, to give you an example, I haven't seen the Symphony of Lights performance for years. In 2004, some millions of dollars were spent on the shows. This is to enhance the appeal of Hong Kong. Well, Symphony of Lights have been there for years. How many people actually come to Hong Kong because of the show? How many members in this LegCo have seen the performance? Over the past 20 years, the show has remained the same. There haven't been many changes. In the 2024 budget, it was said that the Tourism Bureau will spend $300 million to revamp Symphony of Lights. Of course, this includes pyrotechnic shows as well as drone shows. And the approach is that the government will hold tendering exercise. Well, I can't say for sure whether through the tendering, the government will be able to save money, but the government is taking the lead in this project. We need Chinese enterprises or foreign companies to help publicize the show. Take boat tour or boat trips, for example. Many boatmen might be interested in making use of drones if the government is willing to spend money. So there's more flexibility in the private sector. It can cater to the needs of tourists and visitors, and this would help us save $354 million, and at the same time we can perhaps recover some millions of dollars. Can the government change its mindset so that there is room for it to increase revenue? Well, you cannot just rely on land sale. I hope that through tendering exercise there could be competition in the market. You could perhaps listen to the views of the private sector to see what kind of public resources or projects could be outsourced to them to save up on cost. Every year we talk about whether there should be an increase or decrease of civil service pay. Well, NGOs often follow the practice of the government in this regard. Over the years, civil servants, regardless of their performances, they manage to go up the pay scale. My view is that, well, last year some 50 people were dismissed and no one was demoted. Is it reasonable for the government not to lay anyone off? If you look at those 50 people, most of them, they got dismissed because of their criminal conviction records. I think the government or the Civil Service Bureau should take the lead. Through an incentive scheme, you could come up with a promotion and demotion system. Thank you. Mr. Tang Ka-piu. Thank you, President. Recently, there have been sanctions against Hong Kong and China. Also, many people go to the north to spend. The major pillars in Hong Kong are facing huge challenges. It's not optimistic in relation to the revenue that we're going to get. Over the past 3 years, we've got over $100 billion of deficit. The economic hardship that we face give us opportunities to change. The government should adopt a new mindset to optimize its fiscal structure. It should make use of innovation and technology and review the allocation of resources among government departments and bureaus to cope with the challenges. I thank Mr. Edmund Wong as well as Mr. Bill Tang for their motions as well as amendment respectively. Over the past few years, we've seen a lot of spending from the government, in particular in education and healthcare. The government should set targets in relation to spending reduction. Spending should be cut by 5% or more. For concrete measures, the government departments should come up with their own measures given their own conditions, because they know best how they can cut back on spending to minimize the impact on the public. To make fair adjustments, there should be an appeal panel or committee for government departments that fail to meet the target on cutting back on spending. There could be a panel dealing with appeals to listen to government departments' proposals. The panel should, based on the conditions and situations of each department, make a decision. Civil service pay is one major recurrent expenditure of the government. Technology can efficiently help reduce manpower and spending. The government should rely on technology as one of its major initiatives. It should come up with targets and roadmaps. Each government department should make quantitative analysis and make use of technology to reduce manpower. Take year 2023 to 24 as an example. Civil service pay expenditure was about $156.2 billion, accounting for 26% of government spending. There are 170,000 civil servants working in the government, but the establishment is 190,000. The government should come up with reward and penalty system to remove those whose performance fall below standards. There should be an effective system in place to encourage civil servants to perform well. This will help the public enhance the satisfactory level of the government. This will also help enhance the quality of government services. In recent years, we have seen new job positions created by the government whenever there is new work. The government could make use of automation or remove outdated projects to release manpower to take up the new workload. However, there is always creation of job positions instead of removal of unnecessary job positions. Unless absolutely necessary, or unless there are job posts that require experts to take up, the government should not make job creations a norm. Ms. Judy Chen. Thank you, President. I thank Mr. Edmund Wong for moving the motion. This gives us an opportunity before the announcement of the budget to have discussion on this topic. We all know that the government is facing a very dire public financial situation. There's a need to have a reform. People all know that the government is facing a deficit, excluding fund proceeds as well as bond issuance. This is the 6th year that the government is facing a deficit, and during which 5 years we see a deficit of $500 million. And we are seeing an 11-month low in terms of our fiscal reserve. If you look at the relevant figures, we have seen drastic increase of government spending, in particular in education, healthcare, as well as social welfare. Since year 2017 to 18 to 2024 to 25, education expenditure reached $80 billion to $106 billion, accounting for 30% of government spending. For healthcare, the spending was increased from $65 billion to $109 billion, accounting for 75% of total spending. Social fare accounts for the biggest spending. It increased from $65 billion to about $127 billion. The increase was drastic, and our revenue fell below expectations. Take land premium as an example. From year 2019 to 20, the revenue dropped from $147 billion to $19.6 billion in year 2023 to 24, while the government estimated that there would be a revenue of $33 billion, but for the first 6 months, we only got $4.5 billion in terms of land premium. So we see that the government is facing huge challenges. 2 years later, we'll see the announcement of the upcoming budget. Different political parties and groups have given their suggestions on how to solve the situation to the Financial Secretary. Apart from the New People's Party, other political parties also support the idea that we should cut back on recurrent expenditure by 5%. The Financial Secretary made an attempt in year 2024 to 25 and 25 to 26 by reducing the recurrent expenditure by 1% every year, but the results were not significant. We hope that the government can see the reduction of recurrent expenditure as its target to help narrow the deficit. Apart from government spending, well, the New People's Party is of the view that the government should focus on its funds in terms of finding a solution. Different government departments, under different heads and subheads, there are funds established. Since the return of Hong Kong to our motherland, that is since 1997, the SAR government has established at least 47 such funds, of which 28 in year 2022 to 23 saw $144.2 billion of net total assets. A lot of these funds have completed or fulfilled the purposes of their establishment, and so it is worthwhile for the government to review these funds and assess the management of these funds, and where appropriate, the released resources should be returned to the public coffers. There have been different views in the community in relation to how we can address the issue. I hope the government can consider them. It is not easy to eliminate a fiscal deficit. With a fiscal deficit, it drags down the economy, and it also undermines certain people's interests. While the government might have to make difficult decisions, I hope it could be bold in helping us tide over the storm.
Mr. Michael Look, I speak in support of the motion on comprehensively reviewing the SAR government use of resources to optimize its physical structure by Mr. Edmund Wong and Mr. Bill Tang's amendment. In the past, when we had a surplus, we talked about being happy. Now we have $100 billion deficit. The situation is different. It's a worry. The Hong Kong people are brilliant. We are flexible. Now that we have a problem, it gives us the opportunity to reform and change. Sometimes you will have to be cornered with challenges before you have the determination to make changes. So when we eliminate the deficit, we need to propose valid points. When we met with the FS, we said that no matter how you cut costs, please maintain the public services to the general public intact. That includes education, healthcare, as well as social services, because you need to maintain confidence. If you cut costs and reduce resources, resulting in a reduction of public service, this will affect the sense of happiness of the general public. confidence, the public's confidence will be affected, which in turn will affect the local economy as well as the domestic circulation. We have to be prudent. Where can we save? In this term of the LegCo, the FTO, including myself, suggested that there should be a cost-effectiveness public works subcommittee. This subcommittee has been working for half a year. We have public projects of $90 to $100 billion, so we need to look at cost control. As we all know, that construction cost is expensive, the highest in Asia and the 9th in the world. It's a drop because during the epidemic we ranked the 3rd. The government's project cost control office has delivered results. Construction cost has reduced, but we are still 2 or 3% more expensive than Singapore, and about 3 to 5 times than Shenzhen. If we can reduce cost by about 1% every year, we're talking about tens of billions of dollars. People are not completely happy about the expansion of the LegCo complex. We spend about $1.56 billion on it. When we look at public works projects, a police report room, the renovation cost about $20 million. Renovation of a public toilet is about more or less the same. So it's expensive, whether it's a big project or a small one. We have been asking questions of the sector. The government said that there are a lot of projects in the pipeline, say, for example, the Northern Metropolis. It's difficult to make any reduction. We still have to launch these projects. The quantity should not be reduced because a lot of these projects are related to people's livelihood. But cost effectiveness can be improved. Say, for example, the planning standards and guidelines. Isn't it too vigorous? Is the design too luxurious? What about the formalities and procedures? What about administrative procedures? Engineers said that a lot of time is spent on waiting to go through the procedures. And currently, they are required to submit paper-based documents, which drives up cost. There can be collective procurement or bulk procurement, use a design and build contracts so that cost-saving construction methods can be adopted at an early stage. There can be better and cheaper materials and the use of NEC, which is the new tender systems, to reduce the risk of premium. All these can be adopted to contain cost. So I think, well, we can reduce 20 to 30% from materials, about 20% in plant and machinery, as well as cost management. There is a lot of room for compressing cost. So we need to cut cost so that we can achieve a fiscal balance. Let me remind members that under the time allowed for this motion will end at 5:17. I'll allow 6 more members to speak. Then I will ask the mover to speak. Then we will handle the remaining procedures. Mr. Lam San Kong. We're facing a change that is never seen before. There is the U.S.-Sino economic conflict. So there is uncertainty in the future of Hong Kong's economy. We all need to work together. Every year, I perform my duties as a legislator to look into proposals and suggestions for the budget. I'm not an expert. I have no comments as to whether my suggestions are adopted, but I am a lawmaker. It's my duty to monitor the government to act in accordance with the law and require the government not to violate the basic law. Article 107 states that the SAR shall follow the principle of keeping expenditure within the limits of revenues in drawing up its budget and strive to achieve a fiscal balance, avoid deficits, and keep the budget commensurate with the growth rate of its GDP. The budget is required to strive to achieve a fiscal balance and to avoid deficits, as well as to keep the budget commensurate with the growth rate and its GDP. Since 2019, we see our finances dwindling. From 2018, we have about $1 trillion in fiscal reserve now. It's dropped to about $508 billion. We have a structural deficit. So don't blame land premium. The recurrent expenditure far exceeds operating revenue. The deficit has expanded to 2023-24 about $30.3 billion, an increase in terms of deficit by about 6 times. For GDP, as a result of the riot as well as the epidemic, GDP has been fluctuating. According to statistics, in 2023, GDP has surpassed the level of 2019. And there's an increase above 2.4% in 24. In 2019 to 2023, government recurrent expenditure has increased by 23%. However, operating revenues has increased by only 17.1%. On healthcare as well as social welfare, the increase registered 37% and 27%. I don't have the actual figures of expenditure for 2024. It's very likely that it's higher. So the extent of increase of recurrent expenditure far exceeds the growth rate of GDP. I understand that there is a cycle, but growth cannot rely on government expenditure to prop it up. We should not keep spending. No excuses should be made for cutting costs. Is it the case that do as I say, not as I do? I think the government should mirror the approach of the U.S. government by setting up an efficient unit. This efficiency unit should slash government expenditure with resolution. So I support the original motion as well as the amendment. Ms. Doreen Kong. I thank Mr. Edmund Wong for moving this motion. We've been relying on sale of land, but we have an aging population. We have climbing construction costs. Our economy and finance is vulnerable. In 2024-25, recurrent expenditure is expected to increase to $580 billion, which is 75%. Public expenditure to GDP has increased from 60% to 25%. This shows that the increase in recurrent expenditure poses constraints on our fiscal flexibility. Just like similar motions that we've had, we're now faced with pressure from a transformation of our economy as well as increasing financial difficulties. We should be determined to make changes. In a motion, there is a mention about restructuring resources of the public sector. We need to consolidate resources and improve efficiency. The government should take stock of redundancy as well as duplication of services. There are funds that doesn't generate any income, and there are departments and sections that are inefficient. Data and information should be disclosed to the public so that the public can monitor the government. Similar organizations and sections should be merged. Surplus reserve should go back to the general accounts revenue. Subvented units should be differentiated. Say, for example, the HA from the airport authority. For the airport authority, their ability to make use of the market should be strengthened. There is also the hot topic of reform of the civil service as well as digitalization. Civil service accounts for 26% in expenditure. The establishment is ballooning. Apart from the short-term pay freeze, we need to introduce a structural reform. Say for example, streamlining of management. The management should be more efficient. There should be e-government service. AI should be used to streamline approving procedures to reduce manpower requirement. Transparency should be increased so the public can monitor the government. Source of revenue should be expanded. Well, we need to have a reform of a progressive system of our taxes. We can expand offshore renminbi businesses as well as other businesses. We should strengthen Hong Kong's position as an international financial center. We need to reprioritize the different projects. Every year we need to take stock of the necessity of the different projects and avoid projects that eat up our reserve. However, we need to be mindful not to have an across-the-board approach. Education and healthcare should not have its expenditure cut. However, we can put in place mechanisms to prevent abuse. We need to improve efficiency by using technology, say for example, digitalization. We have to be fair say for example, progressive tax system. We need to have better financial management. Our competitiveness does not lie on a low tax regime. We need to make use of the budget to turn these challenges into opportunities. I so submit.
Mr. Yim Kong. Thank you, President. I speak in support of the motion of Mr. Edmund Wong and the amendment of Mr. Bill Tang. Public expenditure, land premium, all these are affecting Hong Kong. We have a fiscal deficit of $100 billion or so. The government needs to create new income sources, and we should focus on cutting expenditure. Concrete measures include widening the tax base and conducting better management, improving housing policies, and so on. There should be deployment of technologies and review of public organizations' expenses. In the coming 2 to 3 years, in the middle of serious fiscal deficit, the civil service pay should be frozen. The pace of building infrastructures should be managed. Tendering procedures should also be managed. We should optimize management of public expenditure on social welfare and benefits. All these will pave the way for future solid economic development. I'd like to speak on 2 points. One, to strengthen management of universities. Every year, UGC funding is close to $24 billion. There is keen global competition as well as restriction of resources. We need to make better use of social resources in order to develop education into an industry. Concrete measures include increasing the ratio of self-funded courses or places. School fees in relation to professional degrees such as medicine and law should be increased. There should also be more copyright fees in order to increase the income of universities. We should also rigorously encourage universities to foster closer ties with entrepreneurs and companies. We should encourage commercialization of R&D results in order to create better economic benefits. This will inject new economic impetus into society. We should improve funding given to NGOs. At present, the government is subsidizing 177 public organizations, with annual subventions being $24 billion. All these are not fully utilized. How much is spent on the needy? We need to consider this. The salary of the higher echelon is over $100,000, where for typists, the monthly salary only stands at $20,000. We need to strengthen the monitoring of the public organizations as well as NGOs in order to avoid any abuse of resources. There should be a mechanism to monitor NGOs in order to conduct auditing. There should be transparency of the use of resources as well as funds. Mr. Bill Tang mentioned using the strength of the third sector and innovative technologies. These should receive emphasis. We need to pursue sustainable development. I hope that the government will review its use of resources to optimize its fiscal structure and inject new economic impetus, that is to create a better livelihood environment for the people in Hong Kong. Thank you, President. Ms. Chen Yut-ming. Thank you, President. There are heightened uncertainties in the international political and economic environment. Economic impetus fails to continue. The fiscal deficit is running at over $100 billion. The government needs to create new income sources and cut expenditure. The government needs to keep reviewing its use of resources and optimize its fiscal structure. We need to spend in areas in which we do need to spend. We need to make good use of public funds and spend money in areas where we will reap benefits. So I speak in support of Mr. Edmund Wong's motion to review the government's use of resources and to optimize its fiscal structure. We want the Hong Kong government to tide over the difficulties. We need to drive the industrial development of the Northern Metropolis. The Northern Metropolis is the new economic impetus of Hong Kong. It plays a key role in the mid to long-term development of Hong Kong. We need to focus on developing the Northern Metropolis development. In the coming 3 years, the public capital works expenditure will reach a peak. For the land formation works and infrastructure works in the Northern Metropolis, the projects will be taken forward according to the plan. I expect that the government will think out of the box to take forward the industrial development of the Northern Metropolis, including Sandy Ridge Data Center, Hong Shui Kiu Ha Chun, Sentin Technopole. All these are test areas or pilot areas that cover INT land use. We need to develop new quality productive forces. We also need to leverage on health and life science, technology, low-altitude economy, and so on. We need to change the industrial structure of Hong Kong. We need to attract enterprises and talents to Hong Kong. The aim is to promote economic development in Hong Kong. We also need to promote new financing methods for Northern Metropolis in order to ensure sustainable financial stability. $95 billion to $130 billion worth of bond will be issued in order to take forward the infrastructures of the Northern Metropolis. I'm all for it. We need to make good use of public funds, public capital to expedite the development of the market. We need to attract private investors to drive the development of different areas. The land resumption procedures in 1710 have already started. Next, there will be tackling and so on. Land resumption will bring a large amount of revenue for Hong Kong. I hope there will be attractive financing methods. Land resumption compensations will be turned into land securities, which will be shares of the company. I have been advocating developing at the same time. The government needs to consider setting up a fund to develop the Northern Metropolis. This will support the government in resolving the issues of the fiscal deficit. Mr. Martin Liao, Deputy President, the Financial Secretary expects that the fiscal deficit will run at $100 billion, which is larger than the previously expected fiscal deficit of $48.1 billion. This will affect the development of Hong Kong, so it's high time the government optimized its fiscal structure. The FS said that the government must tread more cautiously in using resources. The government needs to cut expenditure. This should be the focus of the government. Civil service pay is an important element in the recurrent expenditure of the government. Government data shows civil service pay increased from $141.9 billion in 2022 to 23 to $156 billion in 2023 to 24, accounting for some 26% of the total government expenses. As of March 2024, the civil service has a total of 173,000 staff members, accounting for some 4.6% of the entire population. Comparing with the population of Singapore, that is 5.9 million people, the civil service stands at 86,000 people. That is the situation in Singapore. We have typist, unit typists, as well as typist supervisors. There is also the pay increment for the civil service until the pay points reach the ceiling of one's position. In relation to the payroll increment, the G19's suggestions mention this one. According to the Master Pay Scale MPS, the increment is about 3.6% between two increments. Take administrative officers as an example. The starting pay stands at 0.27 and the figure is some $61,000. Whereas for MPS 0.44, the salary stands at $119,000. In other words, when an AO doesn't make any mistake, then the AO will receive pay increment for a total of 17 years. So what incentives do civil servants have to improve one's performance? So I suggest that the government should review the pay increment structures. The government should take into account the performance of civil servants. Those with good performance should receive payroll increments, and that is exactly how we can optimize the fiscal structure. Apart from cutting expenditure, we also need to create new income sources. As at the end of last year, land sale revenue stood at only $4 billion, accounting for only 12% of $33 billion. Land premiums are subject to impacts. The government should seek more stable income sources. The government should explore the possibility of changing the tax base. the chief executive put forward some measures in the policy address in relation to improving the status of Hong Kong as an international shipping center. He also mentioned developing Hong Kong into an international go market. I hope that the government will put in place these measures as soon as possible. We need to leverage on our competitiveness in order to achieve better results. The government is having less revenue. It is not just a periodic issue. We need to focus on addressing the problem. I speak in support of the motion and the amendment.
Mr. Perry, thank you, Deputy President. I thank Mr. Edmund Wong for the motion and Mr. Bill Tang for his amendment. In 3 years in a row, we've seen fiscal deficit. This is worrying. A lot of people in Hong Kong are worried about the fiscal position of the government. In terms of how the government can optimize its fiscal structure as well as utilize its resources, it is the most pressing task of the government. Members of G19, as Mr. Martin Liao said, we have already submitted our suggestions. Within 2 years, the government should cut back on recurrent expenditure by 5% instead of 1%. It should also review the civil service pay scale point. All these suggestions are in line with the motion today. As the government tries to cut back on spending, it should not reduce making investments and implementing measures to revive the economy. The tourism industry is facing fierce competition from neighboring places. In January this year, with such a fierce competition, the industry saw 4.7 million visitors, which is a single month high after the COVID pandemic. This is because the government has done a lot of promotional work. We've seen a good start in 2025 during the Lunar New Year holiday, while the tourist figures haven't displayed a significant increase. However, the numbers are still great. We have to continue to put in resources for publicity. We have to do this in a targeted manner and promote our tourism products to increase our exposure in different source markets. We have to make good use of the resources we have, and this is a question that deserves our attention. Under CEDB, there are 14 ETOs in Asia, Middle East, as well as Europe and the US. This is to support overseas enterprises and so on. For CMAB, there are 5 offices overseas, and the work is comprehensive. This is to increase liaison between the SAR government as well as overseas enterprises and so on. The job is partly to promote about Hong Kong. If you go into the detail, in terms of the work of the Tourism Bureau, the Tourism Board, it has been working hard to promote Hong Kong as a premier tourist destination. Around the world, there are 15 offices, as well as 6 regional offices. A lot of these offices are situated in the same city. Under these 3 policy bureaus, we have overseas offices. Are there good cooperation mechanisms in place among these offices to make good use of the resources? Are there good collaborations to consolidate the resources available so that they can complement each other and that they can work together to attract capital, business, and visitors to Hong Kong? I believe they are already doing it, but I hope they can step up their work in this regard. If they can achieve this, it would be great. This is because the government has to work together with different sectors in Hong Kong to bring in capital and business and to go global. The Electrical Research Unit last year did a research on the budget. Like Singapore and the UK, they also faced a deficit. They focused on reviving their economy. Their revenue increased when they were able to bring in capital. There were, for example, the local characteristic tourism scheme from the SAR Government, and this has been effective. And the MICE incentive program was also effective. Your time is up. Thank you. Mr. Benson Look. Deputy President, I thank Mr. Edmund Wong for the motion on comprehensively reviewing the government's use of resources to optimize its fiscal structure. I also thank Mr. Bill Tang for the amendment. The government's target is to allocate resources so that it can improve people's livelihood. Article 107 of the Basic Law also states that we have to spend within limits to achieve fiscal balance and avoid fiscal deficit. Because of a basket of factors, recovery has been slower than expected in terms of our economy. And we have also seen a decrease in tax revenue. That's why over the past 2 fiscal years, we saw a fiscal deficit. To improve the public finances, we have to increase revenue as well as cut back on expenditure. We also have to optimize the government's fiscal structure. Saving or reducing cost does not mean we should not spend money. We have to do it in a targeted manner. To give you an example, in electrical panel meeting, we talked about the reprovisioning of public library, which involves about $200 million to cater to the needs of people in the neighborhood. Well, of course, it would be great to have a library, but according to the Audit Commission last year, from 2015, the number of visitors to that library dropped from 3,700 to about 37 million to about 11 million. And this makes us reflect on whether we should use e-books instead so that we can reduce the size of the physical library as well as the physical collection of the library. Then we will be able to reduce the construction cost. The business sector is well aware that with tight public finances, we should be flexible. We shouldn't be rigid. We have to make reforms. We have to have this mindset so that we can make good use of our resources. The library that I was talking about is one example. Today, we discussed how we can optimize the government's fiscal structure. We have to think about increasing revenue for the government. With tight public finances, still the government should make investments in order to draw capital. How can we leverage its investments? Many members of this council have talked about panda economy and dinosaur economy and so on. How can we achieve this? We have to make use of the resources. I've been advocating a running economy as well as a mega event economy. According to a Mainland's report, a large-scale marathon can bring about 700 million RMB. We have the resources. In Hong Kong, for example, we have hundreds and thousands of local and international runners. We also have the relevant merchandises and sponsors. And this also helps create job opportunities. I think just by running alone, we can create an industrial chain. If the government can put in a little bit of resources and consolidate all the resources we have, then we'll be able to create a running paradise in Hong Kong, and it will also bring benefits to other sectors and industries. This morning it was mentioned by the Secretary that the government is heading towards this direction. I hope that different sectors can help to build a running economy. With tight public finances, I think the government should focus on building a few economies to leverage on the resources we have. Members have all spoken. Edmund Wong, you may now speak on the amendment. Deputy President, I thank Mr. Bill Tang for making the amendment to my motion. While the government should optimize its fiscal structure, we should also take into consideration people's livelihood. On civil service pay cut, well, this may bring adverse impacts on the community. We should make good use of AI and innovative technology to increase the government's efficiency. This coincides with the global trend. Well, all these points show that Mr. Bill Tang echoes my views. Mr. Bill Tang talked about making use of the strength of the third sector to assist the government in delivering its services. It will also help ease its burden. This shows that the community will have to work together with the government to cope with the challenges. This is a good idea. However, in actual practice, we have to be careful so that the government won't give too much power to the other sectors. And we have to prevent the government from compromising the services it provides, and that it would not cost the government additional resources. Otherwise, I support Mr. Bill Tang's amendment.
Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury. Madam Deputy, once more I thank Mr. Edmund Wong for his motion, Mr. Bill Tang for the amendment, and 40 members who have spoken. They have given us valuable comments on the use of resources in public finance. I will give a consolidated reply. In the face of uncertain external environment, volatile global economic political situation, and the fact that our economy is undergoing structural adjustment, the government must exercise greater caution in the management of public finance. The key to improve public finance is to expand the source of revenue and control expenditure. Our strategy focuses on expenditure control, which is along the same line as other countries in the face of an enormous deficit post-epidemic. The primary target is to control expenditure to progressively reduce deficit to achieve fiscal balance whilst maintaining services to the public. As I said in my opening speech, the government has determination and confidence to overcome public finance challenges. We are implementing a comprehensive fiscal consolidation program to gradually restore fiscal balance within a few years through containing the growth of expenditure, increase revenue, and issue government bonds. A number of members are concerned whether the government will cut various expenditure. Their concern is understandable. Given the current economic and financial situation, we are looking into dialing up the fiscal consolidation program by continuing expenditure growth further. This includes requiring departments to review resource allocation and work priority to better meet the needs of society through resource reallocation. An example is the hot topic of $2 fare scheme. As the FS said, keeping the scheme unchanged is not financially viable in the long run. I must emphasize that expenditure control has to be diversified. Deficit cannot be tackled through tweaking individual schemes. What's more, the $2 fare scheme is not the main cause of the deficit. Issuance of government bonds in moderation is conducive to the development of the bond market and infrastructure project. Advanced economies have the same approach. In the 24-25 budget, we announced a plan to issue a total of $95 to $135 billion in bond every year from 2024-25 to 28-29. The debt to GDP ratio over this period is expected to be between 9 and 13%. This is far lower than other advanced economies. I must stress to members that government bonds is one of the tools used to finance infrastructure projects. Funds raised will not go to the recurrent expenditure of the government. We'll strictly follow fiscal discipline to keep government borrowing at a healthy level. This is also a transitional arrangement that enables us to continue to invest in Northern Metropolis and other important infrastructure despite the significant drop in land revenue. The eastward sides will take into account factors such as the finance of the government, market condition, and work progress. When formulating the 25-26 budget, we'll review the scale and mode of bond issuance in the coming few years. We notice that there are people who think the government should introduce new taxes to increase revenue. At the same time, there are others who think this is not a suitable time to introduce new taxes that increase the burden on the people as the economy has not fully recovered. Regarding new taxes, we will certainly fully consider the policy intent of these taxes and the groups that may be affected and aim to minimize the impact on the public. We will continue to listen to different views. On revenue, as I said in my opening speech, the government has launched the 4 measures to increase revenue set out in last year's budget. They are 2-tier standard rates of salaries tax, increase in business registration fees, progressive rating system for residential properties, and resumption of hotel accommodation tax. When considering measures to increase revenue, the government will fully appraise factors such as our economic situation, the overall financial situation, the needs for our society, and the need to keep the advantage of our simple and low tax regime as well as our competitiveness in attracting enterprises in the international community. We attach importance on the principles of user pays and those who can afford pay more. We endeavor to strike a balance between increasing revenue and minimizing the impact on the public. The pace of land sale of the government and land premium are affected by the property market and the economy. Hence, there is a gap between actual and estimated land premium. Indeed, there is such a gap, a considerable one, between actual and estimated land premium in this fiscal year due to mainly economic situation and market sentiment. Nevertheless, the overarching goal of land sale of the government is to maintain a stable supply of land in the market to enable healthy development of the property market. We don't focus solely on land premium, which is a byproduct. The government will not sell land below the market value. On the other hand, we see improvement in the turnover in the residential property market after the abolition of all demand-side management measures. In the upcoming budget, we will update the estimate of land premium and announce the land sale program for the coming year at the end of this month. It goes without saying that due to volatility in the external environment and geopolitics, the financial situation in the future is challenging. We will exercise rigorous fiscal discipline and follow the principle of keeping expenditure within the limits of revenue in tackling the challenges. Maintaining the public finances healthy is an important task. The FS is preparing the 25-26 budget by taking stock of the levels of revenue, expenditure, and fiscal reserves, as well as short and long-term needs of society before embarking on the balancing act. Measures and financial arrangements will be formulated to ensure the sustainable and stable development of our economy and society. I thank Mr. Wong for moving the motion today and Mr. Tang for his amendment, so members have a chance at this time to make suggestions on this issue to the government. The preparation of the budget is heading down the home stretch. Given the short and long-term needs of society, the comments of members in different quarters of society will step up our fiscal consolidation efforts and boost the development of our economy and society. Details will be announced on the 26th of February. I so submit, President. I now call upon Mr. Tang Ka-piu to move an amendment. President, I move my amendment. I propose the question to you that Mr. Tang Ka-piu's amendment be passed. I now put the question to you as stated. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against, please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by a majority of each of the 2 groups of members present. I declare the amendment passed.
Mr. Edmund Wong, you still have 58 seconds to reply, then the debate will come to a close. Mr. Edmund Wong. Thank you, President. I thank the 41 members who have spoken on this motion. They have provided some valuable views on this topic. It shows that the Legislative Council is playing an important role to voice for the public. With uncertainties in the environment and as well as in the external market, I believe the public understand that the government may not be able to give out sweeteners. They are all willing to ride out the tough times with the government. I hope, however, the government would commit resources as and when justified. I hope the government would heed the views of this council and utilize resources effectively. While this is a difficult task, I hope the government would make the right decision. I so submit I hope members will support my motion. I now put the question to you that Mr. Edmund Wong's motion as amended by Mr. Bill Tang be passed. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against, please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by a majority of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the motion as amended passed.
Members' motion with no legislative